Coffee Club, Coffee Club. Grind your beans and grab your favorite mug. It's Ollie, Morgan, George, and Gus. It's them boys from Coffee Club. Boys from Coffee Club.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Coffee Cup Podcast for episode 182. Today, George and I are joined by a couple of absolutely amazing guests. I think George and I are the most nervous we've been for a really long time because we've settled into, I don't know if you guys have had this as well, but we've settled into a real comfort bubble where we used to be a little bit more ambitious with our interviews and all that stuff, but we've just been a little bit lazy recently. But today we do have, I don't even know how to introduce you guys properly, but we have David and is your name Megan?
Megan, yep.
I always get confused between Megan and Megan.
Megan, yeah.
I think I was going to ask that before the podcast.
Is that an Australian thing?
I think we just say Megan. I think people are just called Megan in New Zealand, Australia.
Okay, that's what
But
it
I think
is
in America, I think it's Megan.
Honestly,
Megan.
I like it better. I'm like, fire it away. That sounds great.
Yeah, you're giving yourselves away though. That's extremely un-American.
If we do slip up, apologies.
Oh, I love it.
But thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. We're massive fans, not just of the podcast. Coffee Club has laid the groundwork for so many people to get more invested in the sport and broaden it out, but also getting to see you guys in Boulder and just share good vibes during runs. Seeing you fly by me, it's always very motivating.
That was far too kind.
I
because
knew this was
know
going to be a nice off.
Yeah, I know that's not true because these two are both Boulder legends in their own right, and we were long running behind David only last week, and we never caught him. So I know that I know that he was running faster than we were.
We were like, yeah, we're running pretty fast, but we're not catching him.
We were just not getting any closer. Oh yeah, that was that day.
Yeah.
That
I was probably in the woods taking a poop when you passed me. Let's be honest.
Secret maneuver. Secret. But we're so happy to have you guys on. Before we get into it, quick little shout out to some fun events that we're doing these upcoming weekends. So this weekend, as many know, is the Boston Marathon, well, I guess on Monday. And On is doing a lot of fun stuff there. And we do have some Coffee Club presence there. Us boys, unfortunately, won't be there, but Tom Wang will be there. And actually from our team, Alicia and Joe will also be there. But we do have cool Coffee Club merch that we are giving away for free. And there's going to be a little coffee cart meetup type thing on, I believe, this Saturday. The details will all be in the description, sorry. So check that out. And then the week after that, we will all be going to the pen relays. So just check the description for the details and all that. And there's going to be some RSVPs in there if you could. It'd be lovely to see how many people have coming along because we have a lot of free fun stuff to hang out, to give out to the fans out there. So
anything happening specifically at the Wellesley turnaround point?
The Wellesley turnaround point. I think that is actually, is there an event? Is that where the cheer section is?
I don't know.
That's where it should be. We have this is like a podcast joke where one time I accidentally said that Wellesley was, I think firstly it was a deal because we pronounced it incorrectly, the name of the college. And then and we got caught out for it. And then in the apology, I said, how could I mess it up? Everyone knows it's famously the turnaround point for the Boston Marathon. And then George and Ollie were here, did not correct me.
Yeah, I was just going to let it go. I was like, oh, maybe no one will notice.
I didn't. I was like, yeah, that sounds right. And then I was informed that there's no turnaround point at the Boston Marathon. It's a straight line or something.
Convenient dropout point.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the halfway point though.
I think it is maybe around the halfway point. I don't really know.
Oh, we get it though. So on our podcast, there'll be times where I say something that is so blatantly wrong and borderline offensive in how wrong it is, and Megan won't correct me because she's being kind, and I'm like, Megan, I will get canceled for how wrong I am.
Well, one thing that's interesting, I guess just getting into the talk, that's it for the stuff. Check it out in the description. Because you guys, we have different, we both exist in the running world. We both have podcasts. You guys have the biggest running podcast in the world. Is that true, or is that just what you believe?
Oh,
maybe.
Vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a question of how much you believe in your podcast dreams.
Yeah, I was like, because no, I think I've heard you say that, but I was like, how would he know that?
Oh, well, yeah. The thing that I do is we all pull down our pants at the same time, and that's the measurement. No.
It's a great measurement. We're losing.
I'm already at the point. No. This is not just a man thing. This is business and pleasure.
Show what you got.
Exactly. No. So yeah, it's so fun. I mean, Megan's the smartest person I've ever met, and just getting to talk to her each week is such a blast.
But yeah, the point of me just saying it was that, so we come from a point where we get away with saying a lot of incorrect stuff to the point where it actually is like entertaining for our listeners when we say incorrect stuff, because we have this big disclaimer, like we know we're stupid, like we know nothing. we're just sharing like what's going on in our lives and our thoughts, and that's what you get. Whereas you guys actually have, maybe, I don't know what you want to call it, more responsibility, and not to put the pressure on you, but you guys are extremely smart. You guys, we got a doctor here. Like, you guys have the accolades. You've done the research. You guys are coaches, which is a position of authority. And you guys actually, like, the way it works, you guys are often presenting like facts and studies. So I guess for you guys, there is actually some real pressure there to get it right. But then also on the flip side, it's like sports science changes every single week.
Yeah, I feel like we have to be open-minded, and that's kind of the nature of our podcast. Plus, it's like science and then just kind of insane jokes on top of that. So it's
good
nice.
to lesson to lighten it.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like she has more pressure because she is a MD, PhD, and like doing all these amazing things in the world. And I just get to say, I'm just the guy that kind of is like the straight guy that just makes the jokes that don't really land. So no, it's a blast. I mean, we just love sharing what we're curious about in the world. And, you know, running science is a good example of that, but then also just branching it out into everything. And so the wonderful thing about the podcast medium in general, which I'm sure you guys feel, is it ends up being a conversation, not just with each other, but your listeners. And so when we talk about complex things like that, I think sometimes it's just nice to be like, look, we don't know, but here's our excitement on this thing that we're going to tell you about, which might be like hemoglobin mass changes from hot tub, or it might be something that we heard about at Coachella. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, you know, if you're writing an article, it's much more, everything has to be vetted down to the like decimal point. And so podcasts give us a little more leeway.
And we just got past episode 252, and I feel like the real ones have seen us kind of change our mind on certain things. Like, you know, we recorded long before we took Bicarb or, you know, some of these other things in sports science, and it's been interesting to see our minds change on it too.
I think I shat on Bicarb a number of times before. And then I started coaching, like, you know, professional track runners and was like, oh yeah,
there's something here.
I get it. And I think that drove a lot of my own personal achievements last year.
I am really excited to get into some. I feel like selfishly, I'm excited for some of this because I'm like wondering what I can actually get out of this podcast. Like, all right, how can I actually just be better at running after this podcast?
I think the same for our listeners, because you guys are in more the probably like trail marathon space and we're more in the track space. So, I mean, what you guys do amazingly is you guys are the people that are reading these studies, which I don't read these studies. I don't know. George may read them sometimes. And then you guys are actually applying them. You guys are taking it from the lab to, you guys are coaching people, you know, you guys are actually doing it in practice, which is definitely the hardest part, right? Like, you know, everything's controlled in the lab. So it is really interesting to see how, you know, that's one of the reasons why I like listening to your podcast, because I actually learn a lot of new things. One thing I find so funny is that you guys do sometimes is you guys will use pro runners. You guys will say, yeah, I haven't really seen this much in pro runners. And then I'll be like, yeah, us pro runners don't know what the fuck's going on. I think specifically you were talking about Bicarb and I think you mentioned maybe Yard.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you know Yard, it's like the funniest thing ever. Like, he doesn't take Bicarb just because he just doesn't want to. It's like nothing. I would just say us pro runners are a lot less science-based. I mean, there's some pro runners that are extremely science-based.
Yeah.
But we're not as science-based as you would maybe think. And I find that interesting.
For the most part.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I actually think it's a little different than that in our heads, because when you guys are out there pushing the limits of what's possible by humans, you know, and like putting food on the table with it, you're incorporating 10,000 variables into the output metric of feel. And when you decide to do something, it's not lightly. It might not be like I am doing a control study to measure this output. But when you're doing something, it's like, this is where the rubber hits the road. And if it's a 0.5% difference for me, it's going to be something that I lean into. And that to us is like so much more powerful than a study where like any 0.5% change is going to be overcome by instrument error and all the different biases. And so, yeah, I mean, I honestly think that coaching pro athletes has been more illuminating often than reading the studies. And then usually the studies end up catching up and the two grow together. But yeah, I mean, you guys are at the front end of the performance revolution. So, what you're applying ends up being what the studies are going to find. And if the studies don't find that, it's the study's fault, not a problem of the athletes,
Actually, David, you've been going to the track more, and I'm like, take notes. Because it's
Take
like
some videos.
You learn a lot, actually. And I feel like that's important. Also, we need to get Jared on Bicarb. How do we do that?
World record right there.
Shit, we need to get into
Another
Bicarb.
one.
He's going to set a super world record, a double world record.
Exactly.
That makes me think I should be taking Bicarb just on these couple of comments.
Oh, wait, you don't take it?
I don't like it.
Have you tried it?
Yeah, a few times.
Morton Bicarb?
Mm-hmm.
So GI issues or just haven't liked it?
Not GI, mostly
Just feel right.
just head and like general overall feeling of like flatness / tired and just like feeling a little lightheaded.
Yeah. We've heard that a little bit of some people saying that they have, you feel a little out of body perhaps when you take it. Some people say that.
I get that a bit. But I see it's funny because you don't like that. I love that feeling.
but I would say, so probably.
I felt like less powerful running.
Interesting. So it gets to all of these scientific principles too, is that there's probably responders and non-responders to almost every intervention. And that's why whenever you say anything is beneficial and then you look at the study, it's like the actual lines are all over the place. That goes with like one of the things we're super into is like heat and how heat is used in the modern, like especially pro cycling peloton. And any heat study you look at, you go look at the actual metrics and there are some super responders and some negative responders, even if across the board it's a positive response rate. And so I still think you should try a recommitment to Bicarb.
I think you should cut it in half and try it.
Yeah.
There was
That's
a
what
lot
we
of
tried
chat
to do.
from Morton themselves actually about
We were taking too much.
doing half doses.
I take a half dose.
Yeah, I see.
Half dose of the smallest one already?
Well, no. So I take a half dose of a higher total, but it ends up being way under what is recommended.
Yeah.
Because of GI issues for me. But I think that it gets back to sometimes the limitations of science too, is that the studies are relatively arbitrarily choosing the like 0.3 milligrams per kilogram total.
Yeah.
And different levels work for everybody. And just a little bit on board, if it helps overcome that feeling, might be positive, not just for performance on the day, but then potentially adaptation after too.
And you take it for 100, like you think is beneficial for 100 miles.
Absolutely. Though that might end up being a different mechanism related to like sodium content in your blood. And
That's
stuff.
the thing that I've always wanted, because even like it's recently come into like our sport, and it's especially people think about 800 and 1500, but I've known that cyclists have taken it for so long, and it's like they're doing these way longer efforts. So surely there's something there.
And David too used to be a cramp boy, and like constant cramping. And I feel like Bicarb has helped with that, probably just from like a sodium load-in perspective, that you're taking a crap ton of sodium all at once before racing.
And whenever you throw in something like this, it's has massive downstream impacts that you're unaware of. So, Bicarb's one, but like the big one in our world and is like high-carb fueling. When you start doing that, it's not just about performance on the day. It's about how that distributes to other sorts of things. Like when I mentioned Bicarb, it's like some of the theories for how it might be causing some of this performance change is that it could influence mitochondrial adaptation via other mechanisms unrelated to the performance output. And so, it's just fun because I feel like 20 years ago, we'd have been like, we're kind of close to the limits of what humans can do. And now it's like, I don't know where this is going to end, it just keeps going. Yeah,
that's one of the big things that I did want to ask you guys about, because something that you both mentioned is this performance revolution. And it's funny because, we're in such a bubble. It's like, I didn't even think about it, that there is a performance revolution. And because I'm seeing Jared every day. And,
he is the revolution.
And then I'm like, oh yeah, he did just run like the world record like 2 weeks ago. That is a big step forwards. And then it's like, it's just crazy. And I wanted to ask specifically, and something that you guys have mentioned is that the performance revolution isn't happening in one aspect of the sport. It's happening in every single aspect of the sport. And you guys kind of pair it with the high carb revolution. Is that what you believe is the main driving force right now of all the massive improvements that we are seeing?
I think in trails and ultras it is, just because fueling is such a big part of the game. I think for you guys, there's probably a number. I think super shoes, bicarb, general nutrition, ketones sometimes even. And so I think it's like this whole host of factors coming together, and even just the psychological impact of like, you guys seeing Yared get a world record, I'm sure impacts how you guys think about records too.
Yeah. I mean, I think the unifying like root metric that we have to look at is where the revolution is actually happening. And so trails and ultras is happening, but at the same time, the margins of performance haven't been so narrow that that's not unsurprising at this point. Like, you would expect that as more athletes come in, performances are going to pick up, and that's going to continue. For what you're doing, the margins are much more narrow, so that's a little bit more interesting. And then in professional cycling, it's even more interesting. And so what connects all those things? Probably a lot of what Megan said, but at the core, I think the fueling is the big one, and how that relates not to performance on the day, which obviously impacts marathons and maybe even half marathons, but then just adaptation, that like
it's all compounding.
And just how you respond to the training itself. Like that's the big thing, is like athletes used to just do the training and think that that's what they adapt to. And it's like, no, you don't adapt to the training. You adapt to the subsequent physiological response to the training. And so, the carb revolution is what has pushed that across the board. And there are studies that just show this unequivocally, that if you measure an athlete that fuels appropriately, which is much higher than any athlete used to do, and see how their body responds 24 hours later, all of the adaptation markers are through the roof relatively. Their, muscle damage is way down relative to what it could be. And then you magnify that across the training cycle, and it's like, 28-year-old athletes now are 28 physiologically, but they've put in the bricks of a former 38-year-old athlete. They just haven't, gone through the age-related changes. And it's just like, that's why the young athletes too are just going through the roof.
Yeah, I don't even know how to explain what these high schools.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Where do you even go for
we
that?
should just get. We should just get right into how I feel like you talk about fueling appropriately and the high carb revolution. I feel like we've kind of talked a little bit on the podcast about how we take more carbs than we used to.
Yeah.
But David has taken this. I've listened to your Rich Roll podcast, and my mind was blown. You've taken it to like you're trying to like find the limit, right?
Well, I mean, Megan, how much are you taking nowadays?
I do it on the bike. The bike's a little bit easier.
But give an illustration of what it looks like for you.
I mean, I'll take 140 grams an hour on the bike.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, primarily through actually high carb drink mixes are quite helpful for me right now. But David's doing 150 while running. And I feel like, stacking that up at altitude at a place like Leadville across, 100 miles of a race, it's an impressive GI feat.
Well, I'm only doing that in races, and then in the background, like I was at the track today and did 20 by 400, and I took probably 150 across the hour, 15 minutes of the session with warm up and stuff. And I think what's interesting in applying this as an athlete, when knowing kind of the direction of the sport overall and how the science has changed, is that like we like to say, I'm a guy trying to become a dude. Like I was never the guy that immediately showed my talent, and the types of times you guys run are just mind blowing to me, even as I work my butt off. Like it's just not, how my particular abilities express. And so I'm looking for every little thing I can do to understand like the coaching aspect of it. And then as an athlete, I get to be a guinea pig that tries this stuff out. And so for me, it's like, well, if there is going to be some breakthrough here, like cycling has already seen, then it's worth it for me to give it a try. And so
did you like read something that like convinced you like, all right, this is going to be worth.
Well,
like when did your mind switch to being like, all right, I'm just gonna go so deep into this.
So,
and this is where I'm gonna find the difference maker.
This has been like simmering for a while. But in 2020, some studies came out that showed 120 grams per hour could greatly reduce these markers of fatigue. But there were all these caveats at the time. And even then I was like, this is really cool, but I don't know. And we recommended high carb, but not like super high carb. And then a lot of it came from talking to professional cyclists and hearing what was actually happening behind the scenes. Because like when I say, what are pro athletes doing? I'm like, well, we also have to ask them because they're not writing articles. They're very rarely doing podcasts like you guys are. I mean, that's why that transparency is so helpful. And the cycling world is just like, starting in about 2021, 2022, numbers start going through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And people that don't understand are saying, oh, this is like the evil eras of cheating of the past. And it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in that world, but talking to these guys, it's just, they are housing carbs. And it's changing the way that fatigue resistance works and mainly the way that adaptation to training works. And so for me personally, last year when I finally started like putting myself in big races, which I hadn't done for a while just because coach was my identity, we were just like, well, how do we solve this science problem? And the answer was, because I'm not the dude, right? I'm going to have to go harder than other people have ever gone at these distances. And to go harder than other people have ever gone, I'm going to need to take more carbs than anyone's ever taken.
Makes sense.
And that culminated in a Leadville course record, which I don't think we've mentioned yet. But I mean, do you feel like that made that possible?
Oh,
in
absolutely.
A big way?
Yeah. No, I mean, before that, I used to, every 50K, so like that I'd ever done, felt like the end of the world. Like I could never imagine going farther, no matter how I ran it. And then you do this and it's like your Energizer Bunny of endurance.
Well, also
And
too, yeah, the guy that had the Leadville course record, notoriously high VO2 max recorded, and like
95 VO2 max on this
95.
guy.
Jeez,
Yeah,
in
which
a
is
runner.
Yeah,
in a
he
runner.
just-
What?
I've never
Yeah,
heard.
his
That
name's Matt
sounds-
Carpenter. He is like absolute legend of Colorado. And like so far before his time.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was measured above 90 many times and above 95 once in Italy.
And I love you, David, but like your VO2 max is nowhere near there, like quite frankly. And so it's like we have to solve a different equation. And
Megan's
that's where
pulling down my aerobic pants and
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah, I'm
not
like,
quite there, guys.
That's not it.
Yeah,
That's not it.
not it. And so it's like we got to do something different. And I feel like that's where the carbs came in. It's like this is the only way that it's going to be possible.
But on that note, I think Megan's journey here has been fascinating because in coming back from giving birth to his second kid and committing to high carb here, it's not just a question of like fueling and all of that. Like I think sometimes people listening are be like, oh, well, that's not healthy. It's like, no, actually you're burning all of these carbs. Your body's going to be burning them anyway. The question is just whether you're burning your own like stores and going to catabolic processes or have something to help you in that process. We're not talking about over fueling. It's not as many carbs as you can all the time. But in this process, like Megan has gone through health issues and things like that in the past related to autoimmune condition. And part of the thing is like by not breaking your body down, like, aren't you feeling better than you've ever felt?
Oh, I feel so good. It's actually nice. It's like, we got to come back and parent and work after doing hard training sessions, and like carbs make that possible.
Yeah. No, I mean, I felt that as well. I love the feeling after a workout now where I can just relax for a little bit rather than just feeling so drained. You really do feel the difference, and it is nice. And I like you guys a lot of the time on your podcast, a phrase that you guys use all the time is like fuel for the work that you're doing. And I really like that distinction because I think it helps me at least to understand that you guys are making a difference between the food, the carbs that you're taking for your training and then all the rest you're eating because they are kind of separate things, and you really have to, it's not like you have to change every single meal of the day, but if you can make these changes that are really specific to the training that you're doing, it changes your life.
And one of the coolest parts of the studies is that by doing this, like I think often people are like, well, then won't it just totally change my metabolism? Won't I gain weight? The studies actually show that metabolic rate goes up and overall health metrics improve because what was considered normal fueling in the past was actually just grossly underfueling the amount of work someone was doing. And thus, like, you're just breaking down your own body to achieve that. And then the metabolism slows down to account for it because essentially you're in, feast or famine mode all the time, especially in heavy training. And that's, I think, why, careers were shorter. And we're going to start seeing athletes excel into late 30s, 40s. And that's like one of my personal goals is like the benefit I have is as a guy trying to, level up over time, I need to stack as many bricks as I can. Like this didn't happen when I was 26. It happened when I was 36 and it couldn't have happened sooner. And so now I'm like, well, I want to preserve whatever time I have left.
Mm-hmm.
And that means like health has to come first,
Yeah, it's been quite the change in the last 20 years. I'm thinking back to reading Running with the Buffaloes where
Oh, yeah.
Wetmore, this is probably how 90% of coaches were at this time, but specifically in the book, I think he describes like the ideal male running body as looking like a skeleton with a condom over it. And it's like, Yeah, thank God times have changed since that, because that is not a healthy approach for us.
And it's so bad. I mean, that book, amazing book. And we love, everything that, like everything we know about Mark, but, that conventional wisdom did damage to men and killed women, and I think that that's the part that, like, everything is getting better because athletes are healthier.
And starting at the high school level too, like, we're in our 30s now. You're almost 37. I'm almost 35. And it's like, I wish we had this higher carb feeling in our 20s. Because it's like, think about the aging process and how that extends careers out. And if you start that process as a high school athlete, it's like, damn, the progression on to like the pro and elite level is so much smoother.
Yeah. And the work you're doing with female athletes, I think, has kind of pushed a lot of this forward. And like, what I'm trying to do in training is essentially apply Megan's understanding of female athlete physiology to my own training, and it's been really, really fun.
Do you guys coach each other, or you coach yourselves?
Yeah.
We
coach each other.
We coach each other with a little bit of like, sometimes David gets out to the track and he's like, I'm going to do 4 more today.
And we are married, so,
Gets interesting at times.
You can guess.
I fired him like 3 times.
Don't worry, I don't always agree with my coach either. It's fine. Focusing in on what David is doing, because you've really put yourself out recently in the last, I don't know, year, maybe more actually. Yeah. But you've really, both of you guys have been extremely transparent in putting yourself out there, but you've specifically had big goals coming off last year with racing Western States this year and trying to win. What has that process been for you as a person? Just to, you guys, I mean, I don't know, you guys do get a kind of a lot of hate, right? And every time you put yourself out there, it's an opportunity to get more hate, but it seems to not slow you guys down at all.
Yeah. I mean, how does it affect you, Megan?
Yeah. I mean, we do get a good amount of just people being critical. And I think that's the nature of showing up and being open every week. Like, we sit down and record every Tuesday in our master bedroom with a single mic and make jokes and make fun of each other and are like radically open in that process. And I think in the process of being radically open, it's like we invite that too. And so I think it's, also just part of who we are. But yeah, I think also too, if you show up in this world, like, I don't know, I think, David, you're fearlessly positive and authentic, like not always positive, but just authentic. And I think that creates challenges sometimes, but in a beautiful way.
Yeah. I mean, how does it make you feel when we get critical stuff?
Oh, shit.
You don't.
I mean, it's like, it's no. I mean,
I think it affects me a little bit more than it affects you.
I mean, I'm a human. So it's like, it's jarring. Even the stuff that's like, you're like, oh my gosh, this is someone that's a little bit off the chains right now. It still hurts. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, it's really nice just to be able to do it.
Yeah. I got one today that's actually really, really nice. real fun example. You guys okay if I say this?
Oh yeah, go for it.
I'll just paraphrase it. But essentially, so I have terrible ankles, and so I tape my ankles all the time, even when at the track today, to give me a little bit more energy return. Like, that's part of my rationale. And someone wrote that makes it doping, and that your ankle taping is doping.
Biomechanical doping is an interesting term. Yeah.
And basically, but long story short, there's a lot of stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, last year around this time, I was in a really bad bike crash. And before that, I cared a lot more about what people think who don't know me. And then after that, like, I came out of the ditch after I was hit by the bike and just was like, there's not enough time for that, right? Like, I wasted so much of my coaching career, athletic career, worried about that shit of like, will I make everyone happy? And it's like, no more, right? Like, one, it doesn't make me a better person, but two, like, what about all the years that I missed there? And it could have all been taken away in an instant, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think we both came out of that and we're a little bit like, fuck it, we ball.
Yeah.
And just go for it.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's kind of the yin yang of it where you guys, I mean, we experience it on a very small scale, but we might have 29 lovely comments because our community, our fans are amazing. And then you might have one, but we still talk about that one, like when we catch up, like, oh, did you see that comment? It does affect you way more than it should. But I think on the flip side of it, it's like the amount that you guys give to people and the amount of that I know people love you, like, because of what you give, like, it's I guess that's only going to happen if you guys put yourself out in that way. And that, yeah, the unfortunate side effect of that is then some people, for whatever, I guess it's generally for personal reasons, whatever they're dealing with, they're going to have these negative reactions to it and feel the need to let you know and just be haters.
Yeah. And I mean, criticism is good, right? Like, that's fine. I think the problem just becomes like when things get like vitriolic in ways that are just like high school at its worst. And it's so confusing. And I don't know, kids are a pretty good dose of like perspective on that.
Kids
sometimes.
are so helpful. We've set limitations on it too. It's like, we don't go to certain websites. I have like a 12-minute timer on Instagram. And honestly, that's been like game changing for mental health, is being like, I'm probably going to see that one comment, but it's like putting it in a box and, trying to limit the engagement with it too.
Putting in the box and then incinerating the box.
Launching it to space.
Megan's like, I don't go on certain websites. It's like, I mean, I have certain websites blocked from my computer entirely so that I can't even go on it if I'm curious.
We don't go on Let's Run.
Yeah.
Well, it's like there is like for me, for the longest time, there's a curiosity factor. And even reading stuff that's negative about other people, I feel like impacts me. Like, if I saw a comment, like, we love you guys so much that I think if I saw something against you guys, it would impact me in the same way reading comments about ourselves. And so it's like, there's no reason to go on Let's Run in that context.
Yeah. And like, to zoom that back to real life, going to the track, which is, a lot of my interactions with you guys have been there. Like, I mean, you see how I try to counteract that, which is essentially like, let's just bring into the broader running community as much like love and support as we can, and like a lot of time, if you're having a personal interaction with someone, it can be really meaningful and deep and talk about like depression and anxiety. But if you're at the track, sometimes that's just, you're amazing as you're, suffering a million deaths.
I don't know how you guys do it. Like, where does the energy come from to be so positive?
I mean, it's not our baseline issue, I would say.
No, if you listen to conversations between David and I, we would get canceled real fast. We throw down.
Well, I mean, we're honest on the podcast too.
We're very honest on the podcast too. Yeah. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think it comes from seeing all that. And also too, like, we've both gone through like serious mental health stuff ourselves. And it's like coming out of that, it's like, oh, the answer is putting out small doses of joy and love when possible. And I think, like, as a coach, I see that so often with athletes that I communicate with. It's like, just trying to pour some love into their soul cups, and it's like the path forward.
Yeah.
Well,
love into their soul cups.
We love to hear it. I appreciate every single one of them.
I didn't know who you were. Probably the first, like 2 or 3 years ago, we used to always run past you on the dirt roads next to the res, and we used to get like, oh, "You're awesome." I had no idea who I was like. Who is this guy? Why is he keep saying this to us? I kind of like it.
Why is he the nicest dude in the world on the roads?
Yeah, when you interviewed Allie Ostrander last year, she got a kick out of that. When you mentioned that, I think, but I mean, like, you guys live it, right? Like, it's different for everybody. For me, that type of thing is something that, like, I decided to lean into when I was very young, because, like, when I was 11 or 12, I remember thinking, like, oh fuck, we all die. I was always the kid that was way in my own head, like, lacked confidence in my body, a big kid in class. It's like, well, if everybody feels this way at some level, I mean, not everybody, but like a lot of people feel this way and no one is talking about it unless you're really close to somebody. It's like, well, maybe then it's just a chance to be that little dose of a tailwind for them to like get past it. And so, like, if I say you're amazing, essentially what I'm saying is, we all die and it's okay and I love you.
Actually, every once in a while, you'll say like, you're amazing to the same runner like 30 different times across the course of a year, and they just don't respond back. And then sometimes they do, and you come back home and you're like,
that's my win.
I got him.
Yes.
I got them.
yeah.
I nabbed them today.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's
Just
fun and
keep
bolder
going.
because after a while, like, people know. I mean, they have no idea who you are, but like,
You start seeing the same people.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, think about then how that might manifest a little bit in like a broader cultural shift. Like, we have a podcast where you can have maybe a bigger impact, but it starts at the track or whatever, like just that little bit. Because like, at least for me, I don't think the running world should be like this cliquey, dumb high school bullshit. I think that it's fun to have like, controversy and conversations and stuff like that's different. I just mean the part where like, I don't know,
just put it in perspective.
Everybody takes it too seriously,
Yeah.
and as a result, like the insults become personal. It's like, I don't know. I like some like funny insults. I do not like the personal stuff.
No, rivalries are fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They're fun.
That's what you guys are doing for the sport, is making running fun. Like, on the flip side of this, like, running should be a sport, right? Like, we're huge sports fans, and I want to be able to talk about running in the same way we talk about football or baseball. And we're aware of that, is that like, even like, yes, we've become like prominent athletes over time, but like more than that, it's like as coaches, it's like, well, we're basketball fans. People can insult the hell out of Steve Kerr, and I'm fine with that as like his coaching ability. But maybe you shouldn't say like, you're a dumb bitch with ugly face, whatever. Like, that's a little different.
Something personal.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, man, one of the questions I wrote down was about authenticity, and that was a beautiful answer to most of that. But has that like a big part of that seems like has been your approach to Western States this year, and having this epic YouTube series, and obviously like being really open about your goals there. Has that made the build up harder for you, easier for you? Like, is that more pressure, but pressure is good pressure? Like,
yeah, I mean, for me, it's been so fun. Part of it is like, pressure's amazing. What a cool thing to get to have, like, especially as a sports fan. I mean, maybe this isn't baseline. Like Megan played field hockey, and like, I mean, you didn't love the pressure back then, right?
No, but I love it now. And I feel like we need like ball sport energy more often in running of like, give me the ball. It's, the game's on the line. I want to take the 3-pointer. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in running, maybe it's the personalities or maybe it's how we talk about it. I feel like it's like, we don't talk about it in that way of like embracing pressure. And I feel like we need some more of that like football, basketball, baseball mentality.
And also talking about it, like, you have to feel this way. Like, Simone Biles is not going to land the vault unless she thinks she's going to land the vault. And she'll tell people that, right? She's not going to say, well, maybe we'll see what I have today. It's like, no, you're going to land it. And I mean, before Leadville last year, I remember thinking, like, I put this big goal on paper for this quote unquote unbreakable record that no one outside of Megan really thought I could get. And that was right around the Olympics when Steph Curry did that 3-point shot over Victor Wembanyama. That was like, realistically, if we ran that simulation 100 times, even with Steph Curry, he's not making it 40 times. Like, it was a low percentage shot. But like that type of thing of like, you take the shot, you pose, and you play it as a sport, as a game. I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, chances are this isn't going to work, but like, I'm going to take the shot like Steph Curry because that's the only chance I actually have to have it go in. And like, the flip side actually happens too. And I think maybe that's the next step sometimes, is modeling that. Like, my first race of the season, like, I shat the bed in glorious fashion, and this year. And I know where my fitness is really great, but like, I also called my shot before that one. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, if you're being honest that like, you got to take those long, the half court shots sometimes, it's like, it's also cool when it doesn't go in, and share that story. Like, and so our mission is to just like share the stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think going back to the pressure thing and the way that we look at it, one way that I have, because when I was younger, like I got really nervous. I don't really get as nervous now, and I almost miss it, because one thing that I would think about is, think about how many people out there never feel this nervous about anything for their whole lives. Like, it's such an amazing thing that there is something that you care about and you're willing to put yourself out there for, and you're willing to push yourself for. And at the end of the day, we put so much work into physically training ourselves, and that aspect is so tangible and so obvious, but like the mental side of it, that's the just as big or maybe bigger part of performance. And it's like, you're only going to break through these barriers and achieve something that you've never achieved before if you're willing to take on that and learn how to deal with it and get the most out of it and use it for your benefit. So I think it's really like a privilege to feel that pressure or those nerves about something.
How did you work? I'm curious, like, how did you go from that nervous high school young athlete to where you are now, where you experience fewer nerves?
Probably a lot experience, but then also working with sports psychologists. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've worked with a few sports psychologists in my time. One in particular, like from the Australian team, who was just amazing. And he was just the right person for me, especially at that time. Like, I was racing at the Com Games after being injured for 2 months, and I was just really stressed out because I knew I was going to go race bad, but I still wanted to go race and do my best. And he just told me a few things. He said, for example, kind of the one I just said, where it's like, yeah, you're willing when you go to a race and you know that it's going to hurt really bad, and you're okay with that because that's what it takes to achieve your goals. Why would you not look at the mental side the same, where it's, you go into a race, you know that you're going to feel these painful feelings. Are you okay with that to achieve what you want to achieve? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to accept it and be with it. And yeah, just thinking about it like that, I think making it seem something more tangible, I think was like really helpful for me.
That's really beautiful. David, I feel like for you, I've noticed, like, honestly, I don't think you used to love pain at all. And I feel like this year you've kind of leveled up to the point that you're excited for pain. And I feel like a lot of that gets back to the car accident where you're like, I get to voluntarily choose pain as opposed to having pain being inflicted on me. And you went into Leadville and you're like, I want to have pain of my own volition. And I thought that was really beautiful. But like, I don't know. I think as a coach, your ability to process and be peaceful through pain has totally changed this year.
Well, yeah.
Maybe it's bicarb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
True.
just Bicarb.
Yeah.
Honestly, carbs generally.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to talk to athletes about like, you know, you're enough no matter what. And I think it essentially just gets down to that, is that if on the flip side of whatever big thing you have in life, and running is a great metaphor for life, right? Like it's no different than, is your podcast good or bad? Is your work presentation good or bad? Are you, I don't know, good or bad in bed even? Like all that shit, it's all kind of the same question of self-judgment. It's like, well, if on the end of something you think that it's this option that you're going to just mercilessly judge yourself, then over time you're going to get so nervous because like, what if you fuck up? You're going to be just killing yourself. And so that's why sports psych is like such a great place to start with this stuff, because like it comes down to getting to the point that, well, no matter how that race goes, you're enough as you are, you know? And that it's okay. And it, like, if you do that, like good, because that's what's actually going to help you. Because I mean, as every athlete knows, and this applies to everything, like you're going to have to fail, you know, 2 times the number of times you ever succeed to get to what you're capable of. And if you're not failing, that's because you're not actually like anywhere close to the edge. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's way easier to be at the edge when you just know that like there's no big fall waiting on the other end. You know, you have people waiting for you with like open arms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's nice.
You guys have already explained and demonstrated this many times, but what would you say your coaching philosophy is? It exists on your website. You guys have it written down, but how would you explain it to people?
You start, David. I'll follow.
Tag team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's start with physiology. That power and speed are everything, and that running economy needs to be constantly reinforced year round, and you need to keep that high. So, like before we got prominent as like athletes, like the coaching thing is essentially like fast strides, high power for athletes of all levels at all times. And then mixing that in with, solid amount of aerobic work, trying to focus on classic Z2. And then as it relates like to how like we quantify training, we don't use lactate strips or much of that. We want athletes to really key into like the vibes of what they're doing rather than overdoing the science that we're trying to help with. Because like, I think sometimes science can be superstition masquerading as like this with precision, and it's not. And so we try to take some of that off, make it much more about the, raise the power real high, stay fast, and then do a lot of aerobic work on top of it.
And I think just from like an overall life perspective too, it's like being there for an athlete relentlessly through everything they're going through for life. And I think, we're both very positive people. And I think right alongside that positivity, we're also like fearlessly honest with athletes too. And I think like it's hard to have, like, I think that honesty is really important when you have the level of positivity and like joy that we do, because it's like we need athletes to trust us. And so, yeah, I think we have very open, honest conversations with our athletes and are also just there relentlessly for them through everything in life.
And it's fun. I mean, the cool thing about coaching is like you just learn from the athletes, both about the physiology and coaching theory stuff. Like that's where most of our growth has happened in that front. But then also just about life, like mentioning Boston Marathon, and I'm coaching Jess McLean who's doing it, and I have learned so much from her just about how to be resilient and how to approach the world. And you talk about sports psych, it's like, my God, she could write a book on it. She's so brilliant. And it's like, it helps because like when you say coaching philosophy, it's like, well, whatever it is right now, it's going to change in 2 years based on what we learn from the athletes more than any study,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are you learning from coaching each other?
Oh, yeah.
How to coach
absolutely, yeah.
A ton. Yeah.
Well, it's cool because like that's the time you get all the info, like
Are you on the same training programs?
Very different training
Very
approaches.
different. Yeah. And actually, that's the thing is like all of our athletes, such different training. And I think we're seeing right now, it's like, physiology responds wildly different. Like you see that in scientific studies, it's just like a huge array of data points of an athlete responding to bicarb or high-carb training or, different types of training philosophies. And so we both train very differently.
Ketones or
Granted,
whatever.
you do train a bit like a female athlete.
Yeah, I do. I mean,
What does that mean?
Yeah, what is
a lot more cross training than traditional, like lower mileage at this point in my career. And interestingly, all my personal breakthroughs happened when I went a little lower mileage and just.
I mean, you're giving David 40, 50, 60 miles less a week, probably than a lot of the runners you're racing against in 100 miles. I'm just assuming.
Yeah, probably around that. But the thing is, like, he's put in large volume work in the past. And so it's like, you've had 10, 12 years of pretty high mileage. And so I feel like you can get away with more of a cross-training strength-focused approach while maintaining that speed.
But talk about superstition masquerading as science, like weekly volume being maybe the most obvious one, in that it's obviously important, but people, I think, often, and pro runners are maybe most guilty of this.
Obsessive.
Look at the chart,
definitely.
the bar chart on Strava or wherever they're
It's
calculating,
dangerous.
and think that has any relation to how their physiology responds. And it's like, well, maybe it does generally across a population, but that is certainly not how the cell in your quadricep is interpreting the load. Like your cell in your quadricep has no idea if something is 10 miles or 12 miles, or if you're doubling 4 miles or 8 miles or whatever. And as a result, though, athletes end up chasing, we optimize for the metrics we're counting, and we can count that metric, but we can't count the 10,000 other variables that go into adaptation. And so a lot of our training approach ends up being trying to deprogram athletes from like whatever their way of measuring adaptation was, and say, like, we got to get a lot more holistic, because the only truly honest approach to physiology and biology is a holistic one, because we can't measure the 10,000 input variables. But it's sometimes a difficult road to travel.
It's kind of obvious when you put it like that.
Yeah. No, I loved, why am I blanking his name? What's the New Balance coach? Coogan. Was it him that said in a podcast last year that, like, good science follows good coaching?
Yeah.
Where,
Absolutely, yeah.
where
For sure,
if you're actually paying attention to the right things, the science, there's too many variables right now to do the accurate studies, but I mean, eventually they'll show. But the first thing you should be trusting are the feelings and the vibes. And it seems like you guys are doing. Yeah, I gotta get rid of my Strava graph now.
Oh no, the thing is, like, we love that shit too.
Oh yeah, you were just looking at it the other night. You're like, how can I optimize this? Just like, in like a fun challenge kind of way.
What we were lamenting on the drive over here. So I did 20 by 400 today, and Strava rounds a 65.6 up to a 66 on Strava.
Brutal.
And I'm like, what the hell? Strava?
Totally different.
No, that's a 65.
Yeah,
I don't care what you say.
Every runner knows that you ignore the point.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's 65.9, that's a 65.
Yeah, trust me, I get that. And I mean, I think what you said about the science following the coaching is 1,000% true. And like, while we're science driven, it's only to validate what we see. And that's why professional cycling is such a wonderful place to look here, because in cycling, just as an aerobic thing, like, you're getting 400 of the best athletes in the world throwing every different approach at them, and over time you're essentially saying this is the best uncontrolled science experiment you could ever have. And in top end professional running is similar, though it's a little bit more complicated because of how talent works in running. Like, sometimes different approaches can just work because someone's super talented, whereas in cycling they're all pretty close, and they're all just using the bike as the machine rather than their biomechanics. And that's like you just got to, if it's not showing itself in the pro peloton, not a training theory thing, but like these broader ideas, it's like, it's not interesting. And if it is showing itself in the pro peloton and it's not showing itself in the studies are just behind the times and haven't caught up yet.
Mm-hmm.
So who is writing the heat training protocol?
That's a work in progress. David got a Core 2 sensor, which is the sensor that measures body temperature and kind of gives you a more accurate measurement of heat training. And you've been heat training a little bit more. I've been a little afraid you've been like overcooking yourself.
Yeah. So we do use ourselves as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Because like,
fun.
Again, like, I actually have an opportunity. I'm saying all this stuff about you need to see it in the real world to justify it. It's like, well, put your money where your mouth is. Put your heat suit where your normal clothes should be. So yeah, I mean, heat works like it's very clear now in the studies. The studies have actually been interestingly, this is maybe one of the only exceptions where the studies have come in and then changed practice. So historically, here in Boulder, you'll see, like, let's say the Japanese Olympic team, or like, if you see Kenyans out here running overdressed in the summer, sometimes that's been going on forever.
All the time.
This has been a thing forever. But starting in like 2021 or so, these studies on heat suit came out that essentially showed, well, if you have people do 50 minutes in a heat suit and 5 times a week for 3 to 5 weeks, their hemoglobin mass, so the amount of red blood cells in their body, their ability to transport oxygen to working muscles, increases by 3 to 5%, which is like holy grail of endurance performance. And then that protocol has now been mapped on to like what a lot of professional cyclists are doing. And so it's really cool because heat does that across the board. It's also passive heat should do that too, because you raise your blood volume, which requires your kidneys to produce more red blood cells to correct the offset if you have enough iron on board. So yeah, that's the big black box of
how do you map that onto a running training week? Because I would imagine you're doing that on easy days then? Yeah,
so doubles are the main way in the literature does it. I don't have time for very many doubles at this point with coaching and parenting. So I'm often just, you'll probably see me on the back roads of Boulder, but so I'll just go out on my runs when it's a little warmer in like a heat season.
Because I would just be afraid that I'd just get cooked.
I was going to say, I do think the hard part is it's a massive stressor. And even, David, you took like 2 or 3 days off heat suit and you went to the track today and you're like, oh, I feel like God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, the God of, maybe that's the magic of heat suit actually. It's just not wearing a heat suit.
Yeah.
It's like, because like last week I was
you were fully cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were like barbecued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like rotisserie chicken out there.
Yeah. But I do think it's like, I think for female athletes, I think for athletes doing, like, I think this is a place actually where your lower volume is advantageous, is because then you can start to add in some of these other stressors like heat suit and things like that. And it probably doesn't fully overcook you. It just kind of temporarily pushes that needle a little bit. Whereas I think like stacking that on to female athlete training, I think stacking that on to like higher volume training. And I have questions, especially since like, some of that theory started in cycling, and cycling is totally different from a recovery standpoint. Like you just don't have those biomechanical stressors that you have in running. And so I think it's a place where like, seeing science evolve from cycling might actually have limitations into running too.
But that's where I also think the science becomes such an issue, as you said, is that the protocols are severe in studies because they want to find like obvious results that can overcome measurement error. In the real world, you probably don't need such serious interventions.
You want to find like the minimum amount for the maximum adaptation, basically.
Boom. And like last year after Leadville, I did the Javelina 100 miler to get into Western states, and that was record heat, 100 degrees in the desert. And I did way less heat training than these protocols suggest. And, it was like pretty historic heat performance. And I think essentially, what we're eventually going to find is that passive heat gets you most of the way. So for people like you, like when I'm coaching someone that's pro rotor track runner and we need everything to be quality, it's mostly sauna or hot tub.
I got a sauna upstairs.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Because one of the reasons I asked is because I struggle massively. Like, more than anyone I know, at least on the team. Like I just in Boulder on workout days, like I'll have regular times in the summer where I go like completely feverish, like arms, body completely breaks out and like goosebumps, cold sweats, lightheaded, and like I have to completely stop running.
Interesting, yeah.
And when most of the guys are just completely fine or hot, but like not in a way that is like, it's just like I have to completely stop running. And I got a sauna to, I don't know, help kickstart that. But
when did you get it?
I've had it for probably a year and a half now.
How do you perform at like very high altitudes? Like if you went up to 8 or 9 or 10,000 feet?
Not many of our races are at that altitude.
But like, let's say you go to Mags or Gold Hill.
You went to school in
We
Flagstaff.
don't go there a lot, but I have been altitude for 10 years.
Yeah. So you perform well at altitude.
So normally, all good.
Interesting. Yeah. What anyone listening is like, well, heat and altitude are basically the same adaptation.
Yeah.
Which is such an
in terms of the hemoglobin.
I was curious about.
Yeah.
How often do you use the sauna?
At the moment, I try and get in like 3 times a week, probably.
It's great.
It's perfect.
Yeah. So
but it is infrared, not traditional. Similar.
It's probably similar. No good studies on it.
Yeah.
And
Gotta get that Core 2 sensor.
Yeah.
I was talking to Kelsey about it this morning because I saw from David.
Well, Core 2 said
I was asking Kelsey, I was like, yo, do we need to get some of these?
Every time we've talked about a heat sensor at training, the first question someone asks is, does it go up your butt?
yeah.
Actually, the gold standard is it should.
Yeah, if it does, yes.
If it does, that's the best
We'll take
temperature.
it.
Give me 6. I mean, I think that on top of that, a place for you is that to think about would be something like, if you're double on like that's not preceding a workout, right? Like so, or a long run. So, anytime you have that opportunity of like an open space.
We don't have many of those.
Yeah. Or maybe even just a standalone easy run. I mean, if you have any time where it's like the next day you're not hammering it, like it doesn't take much. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the coolest thing about physiology is like a lot of these new approaches to training end up like being additive and helping you feel better. And if they don't help you feel better, there's probably a problem. And that's kind of where I'm at with heat right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember when we were trying to do it for Budapest, I think it was. Yeah. The thing that I remember the most is just how much it sucked.
Yeah.
Like, I think you don't realize how hard it is. And then you try and do it and you're like, I don't know.
It's miserable.
I think most of us just stopped because we felt that bad.
Well, it feels claustrophobic.
I'd be curious. Did you measure your heart rate while you're doing that?
We were not that.
So that's the problem. So this type of heat training, like active heat training, the amount that it's stressful on your body, you don't really realize unless you are monitoring heart rate. I mean, that's where a Core 2 sensor might come in. But like for me, long before the sensor, like heart rate tells the story. And
I've seen that you're strict about it. Like if you once you get hot, you have to actually have to slow down
so much. So
you're basically like walking on the treadmill.
For example, like I will be running at the end of a 50-minute heat suit session sometimes, like 14 minutes, 30-second pace on like 4 or 5% grade. And at that point, heat training is very fun because it's like
you're just walking.
I'm not doing anything. I'm at 148 heart rate, which is like 5-something pace usually.
Walking at zone 2.
yeah, exactly. And you're just watching the show on the treadmill. But if you don't do that, you just fry. Like if I'm not monitoring, I think I'm normal and my heart rate's up into Z3, Z4. And by after 30 minutes, it's like cooked, right?
So if I'm going to do a double, like definitely like heart rate monitor for sure.
In the first 10 minutes or whatever can be normal. Just because you want to get your core up. But then as soon as you get near the top of Z2, dial back to the point that, I mean, and again, our forebears knew better than we did, right? Like you see the Japanese Olympic team around here and what are they doing on their heat suit days? They are barely moving. And I think that's
true.
Important.
Same with the Kenyans that I know. It's funny because they do it. They have almost superstitions. Like that's why they do it. But like they're getting these benefits from it clearly. But I think for like the Kenyan athletes, I know it's like if you're not wearing a tracksuit, it means you have to run fast that day. So that's actually like the approach they have.
Well,
but
doesn't Kenyan training basically overlap with like lactate controlled training? Like give. I heard Marius Bakken, who's like the originator of a lot of the lactate guided Norwegian training, when he went to Kenya in 2003 with lactate strips, he's like, "Oh, you're just nailing it," And it points out that feel is often the thing, when athletes are kind of pushing that limit.
Yeah. So it's kind of a coaching question. When you see athletes struggling with training or acting in a way that aligns with their feels, what is it that is normally causing that to happen?
Yeah. Usually I feel like fueling often. Like I feel like underfueling so common.
It all comes back to carbs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And
carbs and protein.
Yeah. And I think so many athletes have grown up, especially athletes that we're coaching now, have grown up in eras where there's just totally different conversations surrounding what a healthy body looks like in sport. And I think like 50% of my athletes have had some kind of eating struggle. And a lot of it is just supporting carb intake, supporting like strong, healthy bodies.
Yeah. And I mean, it all gets back to excess stress. And that's one of the big like flowchart arrows pointing towards excess stress is maybe you're underfueling training. Another would be inadequate protein after training. Like you're just kind of, your body's having to break itself down. But others would be like low iron. That's a huge one, especially for female athletes. Like blood work is super key to get. And then finally, like the biggest cause of all is just too much intensity in training. And that's another place where dose response curves vary so much on the individual. Like we all know those athletes that need this massive amount of stimulus to adapt, and then others that don't. And I think often training theories end up getting interpolated from the outliers who need the massive doses, or maybe the better way to say that is not need, but can absorb and adapt to the massive doses and then applied to everybody. And it's the old throw as many eggs at the wall, and the ones that don't break are the champions. And we often say, oh, that egg is just such a hardworking egg. When in reality, the ones that were broken are just as hardworking, probably even more, because it kills them. And so often it's just like, let's dial back the knob on intensity and just, people almost never feel shitty and overtrained from lots of aerobic work. It almost always just comes back to like absolutely ripping themselves up in training, trying to emulate an egg that can just be thrown at the wall at 100 miles an hour.
I think the last thing too is being thrown at the wall at 100 miles an hour is a lot mentally. And so I think as coaches, it's like constantly trying to get athletes to see sports psych and just have those like nitty gritty conversations too.
Yeah. I mean, if it's just like not having fun in the process too, that also, which often can be physiological, but keep it silly, right? Like you guys have see me working out. Like I struggle with motivation all the time. I need to, usually when you see me, I'm probably listening to, Olivia Rodrigo or something.
Get you going. Amazing.
Yeah.
How do you, sorry, you go.
This is just a quick one on the carbs, just because I'm curious, and there has to be other people. Do you guys have a nutrition sponsor? Like how much are we spending on carbs?
We actually, the feed is great.
I know.
It's
I mean, you're wearing a feed hat.
But no specific nutrition sponsors outside the feed. But it's a lot. Like I go for a 4-hour bike ride, and that's like, you're dropping $40.
This is what it's becoming an expensive sport.
It's becoming an expensive sport.
Yeah,
it's not even the equipment anymore. It's just to get through the ride.
and bicarb and ketones, and it is expensive.
Yeah, and like there's ways to make it less expensive. I think it's important to train with like the good stuff when you have the big focused type of work that you need to do. But in the background, if you're doing this all the time, like we have a lot of people that will send in that listen to the podcast, like their own approaches to get these carbs, like at home and stuff.
Yeah, initially there's like all the
bulk
recipes.
maltodextrin or something.
That was a purchase, and like there, so there's a lot of options. Like I think it's good to have that balance. Like you still need to. The modern fueling tech might be one of the biggest reasons for athletes to perform so well. It's just like easier to get all this stuff in, and it goes beyond like if it was as simple as bulk ingredients, like you would see that just a little bit more. But like for the most part, that type of approach, or even just like maple syrup or whatever, like those types of things can work.
Actually, we saw Hobbs Kessler. This was a Let's Run article that I actually did read. Lemonade.
I did see that.
Yeah, Country Time lemonade.
Costco lemonade.
Rice Krispie treats, and it's like those are great carbs.
We all started eating. We started eating a lot more Rice Krispie treats after that.
Yeah.
Yum.
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean,
viral marketing his entire career. From 14 on up.
They paid for that.
You should get a sponsor.
Krispies. Oh my god.
Because I know that I feel like that can feel like a limitation for people that
like the cost.
Yeah,
for sure. None of this stuff is cheap.
Yeah, carbs are carbs for the most part, and
that's a good way to look at it.
It's more important to get it in during training and feel the work you're doing. Like I think the hidden cost of training without it is probably steeper. It's just like losing what you love essentially.
Totally.
Yeah.
Taking a slightly different turn. One thing that I don't know did you say this? I don't know if you said this or not, but did you say something along the lines of whoever can run the fastest mile will win Western States? Am I misquoting?
No, not misquoting it at all. That's a, what would you call that, Megan?
I would say it's in conjunction with other things. I want to see a few different tests. I want to see a mile, I want to see an uphill VK, and I want to see a marathon.
I don't want to see those things.
You're like, I don't want to know those things.
I just want to ask you about the context.
So
the idea.
What's really interesting about ultra marathons in general is that historically it was just like, oh, you're just going and slogging in the mountains. That doesn't make sense scientifically, or knowing training theory of someone like Jess McLean or Ali Ostrander or whatever. It's like, theoretically, all of it is just a curve. Like everything else exists in the human body. Like if you look at a cycling power curve, for example, it goes like that. And at 12 hours, it's lower, but it really starts to level out. So should running. Like in running, you should be able to go at the top end of your zone 2 for the duration of these events, at least. And maybe even harder if you can fuel really, really well. Thus, what determines your output ends up being a running economy equation. How much energy does it take to go a given pace? And every single running economy equation in running ends up stemming back to VVO2, so velocity at VO2 max, whether that's athletes competing in the marathon or in the mile, any aerobic running. And 100 miles are aerobic. And so theoretically, you should be coming back to the same VVO2 framework that would matter just as much for you guys as it would for me. Hence, the types of training I'm doing often looks a little bit like what you're doing, mixed with throwing myself up and down mountains. And interestingly, the studies that have been done have validated that. So they took athletes before UTMB, which is a super duper mountain race where you would think that speed doesn't matter at all. It's just these other like wishy-washy variables. And when they measured them before the race, the only variable that ended up correlating with performance outcomes was velocity of VO2 max. And thus, when I say mile, that's my way of, pushing up against that ceiling as hard as I can. Because my advantage right now, I think, is solely going to be that other athletes are still mixing a little bit of the old school training philosophy in. And I still have a little bit of time before the sport just goes totally bonkers on every single race ever. And probably will even this year. Because in trail running, every record is getting blown out of the water every week now. So speed wins at every distance, I think.
So going back, if 100 miles is aerobic, then why does bicarb help?
Great question. Who knows?
Yeah, I think a lot of different. I think it's back to a huge sodium load. Thinking about starting a race like that for cramp prevention, and I think honestly,
so you're not taking it halfway through.
I honestly,
yeah,
Killian has.
I don't
really.
So again, physiology, and in the physiology is weirder than we think front, which gets back to this discussion of anytime you simplify biology, you immediately are wrong. Is Killian in 2022? So
are you going to get to his lactate levels?
I am.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, Megan knows this. You guys are
Let's
familiar
hear
with your lactate strips and your numbers.
Absolutely.
Halfway through UTMB.
Wait, took a lactate test?
Took a lactate test. Science got published.
Guess what it was?
Guess what his lactate was?
Top of a hill or bottom of a hill?
Bottom of the hill. Bottom of a 6-mile descent. His heart rate,
high, right?
His heart rate at the time was
I
130.
feel like I'm getting the vibe that it's going to be...
Conventional wisdom would tell you it should be 1.5, but...
I'm going to say 3.0.
Go.
Yeah, see, I think it's got to be 4.
Double digits.
No.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
How
I
weird
can
is
barely
the
get it to double digits on the track.
So it's important when it points out that lactate's different than we think.
Yeah.
It operates differently than we think in some of these events. But two, you can see how bicarb might be a little bit different in those settings too. And thus far, no studies have even been conducted on this, but I guarantee in 10 years, we're going to see changes.
Actually, I need to have a lactate meter at Forest Hill.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll just bring we'll bring the edge.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I think what's so fun about ultras and why I have an opportunity right now. Whereas, look, if I raced you guys, it would be so funny. How at a mile,
yeah, don't.
When I'm saying
David, don't.
No, I will not.
Please don't.
I will not.
It depends on the distance.
I have seen these guys run. I will not race.
You're beating us by hours up in
If you guys field well enough, I don't think so. But that's the big theory. But in ultras, it gets so weird physiologically that there's so many different science equations to solve that, there's opportunities to solve them different ways. There's no one solution. But I'm leaning on that to the max. And in coaching, we've been leaning on that for years. We've coached a lot of the best in the world and learned from them. And that's why I love it so much, because it's just kind of a silly human trick to be able to do this. And I think what we're seeing is that the human body is actually capable of way more than anyone ever assumed. And I wouldn't be surprised if, for context, my Leadville record was 15:26. Previous record was 15:42, and that was considered unbreakable. I think in the future, someone's going to go 14:30. That's where that's the type of leaps we're in the midst of seeing. And I'm just lucky that I'm not reaching this point 2 or 3 years from now when I'd be finishing 8th rather than having the, breakthrough.
Do you guys know a dude called Jim Walmsley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah. I feel like I'd be curious to see what he could do at Leadville. What do you think, David?
Yeah. So what do I think? It's hard because I'm saying I want to go to Western States and compete for the win, but Jim Walmsley's there.
Is he coming back this year?
Yeah. And he's so good. And what's interesting is he's been at the cutting edge he was high carb in 2016, he's so far ahead of the game. And the goats of ultra running are already just like the goats of track. They're amazing. It's just in ultra running, the depth is so much less, extensive than for you guys, where it's if you show up with just even slightly being off, you just can't plaster over that with, carbs and belief.
That's a good way of putting it. You know what's so funny? This conversation has brought up in my mind is the first ever ultra runner that I ever heard of was Dean
Carnazes,
Carnazes. And the reason I knew about him because he's famous for like eating pizzas while he ran.
Boom.
And that must have been so long ago.
Carbs are carbs.
Yeah. I mean, for these long events, it's like the conventional wisdom, even last year, was you need to do real, quote unquote, real food. And I'm like, why?
Yeah,
Why?
didn't you weren't you just not stopping long enough to even consider that?
I mean, I just am like, I don't want to eat real food. I want to just
Also,
have
like chewing while running is a
Also,
project.
These gels now are so good. Getting back to like the tech, like the reason this couldn't have happened sooner is like a Science and Sport Beta Fuel gel or a Morton gel. It's like a Science and Sport Beta Fuel. I call it slurping, where I take it just past the palate.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that.
Just
I don't know how you do that
all
either.
gone.
Yeah.
That would be
Well, you can't taste it.
Yeah.
What-
So like the problem becomes in these long events, you start to have palate rejection, where the reason you used to not be able to take in gels this much is like if it hits your palate, especially the more viscous ones, you just immediately reject everything in your stomach. It's just like a response. And I had that in 2023 at the first longer ultra I did, where I and realized like, oh, actually the way the next step in this, if I'm going to succeed, because that ruined my race of like the first big race I did, is I'm going to need to like figure out how to solve the fueling equation, which isn't just the numbers, like it's actually how to do it. So like the GI training,
Mhm.
your stomach can tolerate that, but maybe most importantly, how your palate won't reject it when it
Actually,
gets hard.
David trains like a competitive eater, which is a really fun part of this equation. Is like sometimes he'll go out in a long run and drink all his fluids at once or take all of his carbs at once, and it trains the system to get like more resilient to that.
Yeah, and fascinating studies on that too. Like our GI system is just as trainable as every other part of our body.
Have you found the limits of how much you
Yeah,
can
that
take?
sounds horrible. How many liters are we talking? How many?
I've done so before Javelina. So after Leadville, like, that was this thing that goes like international news at the time and like totally different than I ever expected. And like the temptation was just kind of sit down in that. And Megan was just like, David, go for it. Like that was the lesson from this is not to take risks, is to keep shooting shots. So when Javelina 100 is a golden ticket race to get into Western States and it was going to be so hot, my concern was I have a very high sweat rate. How am I going to take in this much fluid? And so, yeah, do as I say, not as I do. I would never, ever tell an athlete to do this. But
always pairing it with electrolytes too.
Yes. Always high electrolytes so you don't get the overhydration issues and fluid needs. But in the middle of runs, I would sometimes have, 1.5 plus liters. So like 1.5 to 2 liters at a time. After I've been working to that for years though.
That's like 4 little Morton bottles, or like 4
That sounds very painful.
bike-sized bottles, right? And those 500 ml.
Yeah. So like three of your normal like plastic bottles.
Yeah.
Plus a little bit.
That's crazy.
Just
Very
that one
impressive.
go.
One go.
Sometimes it's protein powder too.
Oh,
Well, I mean, that's not during. Well, actually, I guess I would go down then and do the treadmill.
You would do it, before the treadmill.
Yeah.
That was very impressive. That's like sludge.
Yeah.
that sounds horrible.
I told some of this to Rich Roll, and that's why he called it the mad scientist of all training. But I'm like, I'm not a mad scientist. I'm literally just trying to solve an unsolvable equation.
Maybe not mad. This is a little weird.
Yeah. I like the word iconoclast. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
I never used that before, never heard that before. And I looked it up and I was like, Rich, I like your vocab.
Oh, he's got a great vocab.
But a lot of this comes from like, I have a tendency to like want to experiment, want to try things. And Megan is extremely grounded in reality in the real world. And is also, I think, like the best coach in trails and ultras, like objectively, if you look at her athletes' performances over time. And thus it just is like I'm, having that. Otherwise I none of this would have ever been possible.
Yeah. Well, I let you go downstairs and slurp protein, and then every once in a while I'm like, yo.
Yeah.
That's too much.
We need a line here.
And I mean, the coolest part of all is like, she was like one of the best ever in 2016 at trail running, and then went through health issues and now has had 2 kids, and now she's coming back with this new context of the sport. And so like, it's like 2.0. So, I'm getting really inspired now by seeing how she's evolving, and now we're getting to bounce ideas off each other, which is fun and will probably lead to me doing less stupid shit.
Amazing. Are you going to get back into trail racing at some point soon?
Yeah, I'm excited. I had a baby 3 months ago, so right now my pelvis feels a little spicy, to say the least. But it's exciting. I think I had heart issues for a year and a half, then had 2 babies. And, now I'm excited. It's like seeing David too has been living and seeing his reality has been the ultimate dose of just the power of dreaming big. And so I'm excited. I would love to do Western States. And the longest race I've done is 50 miles and kind of step up into those longer distances.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's such a different universe to us.
It is.
You guys would be great at it though.
I want to do it one day.
It's definitely becoming a lot trendier. A lot the trail world is way bigger than it used to be. I feel even On is I feel like On is making a pretty big push into the trail world.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because they put all this sponsorship money into pro teams and all this, but I think the trail world and that kind of world is, I don't know, to me it's so cool and it's such a good opportunity. And I don't know, it's my mom does it and stuff. It seems so big. And the participation has to be crazy.
Yeah, no, it's so fun. And I don't know, I actually think on the professional side, there's probably about as much money as there is in roads. Not at the very top end, the contracts are similar, but then maybe the middle class is making more money in roads and track, but then there's just a very large number of people that are now starting to get paid in trails. And so,
and that must be a way different climate than 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
So different.
No, it's changed so much.
Especially for female athletes too. An old contract for female athletes used to pay very few bills. Now it's you can make a good living, which is great.
Yeah, but I mean, the main thing, for you guys, your events, as you were saying, you accept that they're painful and hard and all of this. Trails and ultras are different. Yes, they're difficult, but they're difficult in a totally different way. And so I was on a podcast in 2014 that I remember very distinctly with Joe Gray, who's a champion legend mountain runner. He's also won the US Cross Championships at some time. And what he said is, I think people do ultras because they're afraid of pain. And I remember being that's weird because I could never imagine running farther than, I don't know how far I'd run at the time, but 20 miles or whatever. And now I actually kind of understand what he means in a good way, in the sense of trails and ultras, because it does get messier in different ways. It's not the same type of feeling you have where your body just starts to be oh God, oh God, oh God. And I personally love that. And I don't think it's for everybody, but if someone's out there listening and has thought, oh, this is impossible, it's too hard. It's actually, I think it's easier. And that's one of the magical things of it. Or maybe hard in a different way. And that type of hard, I think, is for some people liberating when they're disillusioned from track and roads.
Well, track and roads are they're more brutal in a lot of ways. It's you get 400-meter lap splits. It's just painful, and it's just a lot more, what's the word? It can get more stale, I suppose. Yeah. Whereas so many of the benefits from running, I think, are preserved and heightened if you're out running in the trails, So many the things that make it magical.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you look at track workouts I took splits today on my track workout because we filmed a video around it, but every time you guys have seen me out of the track recently, especially when it's windy, I will never look at my watch.
Actually, you started on the backside the other day. You started where did you start on the track?
Oh yeah, when the last time you guys saw me, I was starting at behind the goalposts, so the 150 mark, because I wanted to get more of a tailwind. But yeah, I mean, this is something I learned from Megan is track workouts can be vibe based too. If it doesn't matter, every half second, and I've learned I need that in my own running journey because, as Megan taught me, it's just if you're going to a track workout and it's you are just becoming a number, it just, for my brain at least, it's really hard, especially because usually those numbers are not telling me this beautiful story that they're telling Yared or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw him do a stride oh my God. He
Actually, David talked about that all night long.
He did stride for the cat. I think someone was taking a little photo shoot of him or something. Yeah. So it was a really high quality stride. I was oh my God, that is a work of art. And I think I told him, and I think he thought it was really weird because
he probably loved it.
I don't know. I got a little self-conscious after that one. I was probably shouldn't tell someone that they're a work of art. That's going a little too far. Just stick with your amazing.
Yeah. So, all right, hypothetically, Western States is in June, right? By June, I could run a pretty fast mile. I show up to the start line. My mile PR is
Probably the fastest, yeah.
Probably the fastest on the start line. I've been in the sauna a few times a week. And I've got a good fueling plan.
Yeah.
Like, what's my limiting factor in this theory
Just
of yours?
Muscle breakdown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
muscle breakdown.
I would
That
be
is, you
really
have to
worried about
train.
you getting rhabdo.
Dying, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, death.
Death. Yeah.
Death is the limiting factor.
We have
You have
been
to
in
survive.
We've been in hospitals with athletes, including
Okay.
after Western States. Yeah. So like,
No, and I've also never run more than like 17 miles.
oh, you
Death. Definitely death.
death, yeah,
Death
for
for
sure.
sure. Yeah.
But not if you could train starting now, because the muscle breakdown element can be trained really fast. That maybe one of our favorite things in all of exercise physiology is called the repeated bout effect as it relates to eccentric muscle contractions. And so you've had this experience, like if you've ever, well, I don't know, have you guys ever run down really steep hills and then been sore for like 3 days after?
Yeah.
Morg is known for his downhill running.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Crushes
Come
downhills.
win Western States. Please. That'd be so cool. But no, seriously, after you just go do Black Canyon 100K after you're just a little bit done this stuff. Or even while you're doing it, you could do both. But yeah, so the repeated bout effect, when your body goes through eccentric muscle contractions, which is lengthening under load. So you can think about it like going fat and lengthening under load. And that can be upper body, lower body, which really happens on steep downhills. It causes muscle breakdown. If you take the measurements of someone after Western States, their CK levels, so the quantity of like essentially muscle breakdown they've had, are at levels that if a doctor saw them that didn't understand the context, they would immediately admit them to the hospital, like on the spot.
Like 100,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like scary. But the repeated bout effect gets reduced like by 50% every time you do it. And so, so in other words, it probably takes 4 to 6 stimuli to be ready for some of the downhill breakdown. And
4 to 6 times what?
of sessions, let's say, that then have
Exposure.
long tail recoveries of, getting over it. So like this, I go through an experiment every winter where, for a while I'm not able to get to trails or steep stuff. And then I'll do the first run that's a little bit steep. I will literally be unable to walk for 4 days. And then by the time I get to now, I can do that same thing and not be sore at all. So you'd have to harness that. But basically it's that plus running economy plus fueling is our theory.
If we give you a mountain
Decent.
long run, I think every weekend from now until Western States, I think you could do it.
With hard downhill.
With hard downhills. The other thing too is there is like technical running ability. Like there's a lot of rocks, and every once in a while, like we can tell pretty immediately when we see a road or track athlete run a switchback. It's like we can probably tell within a half.
The downhills are crazy.
Any
Yeah.
steepler could be great.
Yeah, I feel like both of you guys would be great.
Yeah, anyone that's ever done steeple would be an amazing trail runner.
This sounds like a fun
Yeah.
experiment.
So, how do you that muscle capacity
Yeah.
brought down to track running? Like how important? Because I have this is like where I'm going with this is that I do a bunch of cross training,
Mhm.
which I've always done, and I like some days I know that I'm getting more aerobic benefit from the cross training, either because it's longer or it's just like more consistent. Maybe just like longer, more consistent than like a 30-minute run.
Yeah.
But I'm like in my mind, I'm like, all right, it's still not the same as running because I'm not getting the muscle adaptations
Yeah, the impact.
from where's the balance and like how important is that muscle capacity? Like where does that meet up in track running?
I mean, I think
like I don't need to be able to smash downhills, but I mean I need to jump off a water barrier.
I think for road marathoning, actually, it probably makes a big difference. Like for athletes that we have doing fast road marathons, we actually have them do some repeated bout effect of downhill running to prepare their legs to run fast at mile 20 of a flat marathon. I think for steeple, I think there's some components of it that would matter, but I think it's a lot less relevant to the marathon.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
there's interesting studies that find that this eccentric loading will subsequently increase strength and jumping capacity 2 weeks later. So there might be some benefit to doing a little bit more downhills. That being said, for most road and track runners, I think something like mags is the type of downhills we're talking about, not something like, the types of trails where you demolish your body. And then as it relates to like cross training overall, I think that's a place where there has been so much like truthiness that is science, like, but not related to weekly volume. Because like if someone has really good running economy like you do, that cross training will be put into that running economy framework, and you just it's an aerobic framework at that point. So as long as you're getting baseline amounts of miles, which is probably way lower than traditionally thought, cross-training and being good at cross-training can be like, I think, a secret weapon. And that's why, like, when there's people talking critically of, let's say, Ali's training or Parker Velby, who, you know, we don't even know, but similar types of training, it's like, I think they're just a little ahead of the curve sometimes. It's like, if your running economy is really good, then all the cross-training you're doing, it's probably more beneficial than that little shakeout run. The hard part is getting your running economy good without doing high volume. So it's much easier from the framework of you where you're already fast. If someone has never gotten fast, it's a little tougher to get there via cross-training.
Is your cross-training the bike as well?
Or Stairmaster.
Oh, yeah.
Western States,
More
baby.
recently.
Stairmaster, is it the
I'm
stair
really-
mill or is it the one with the revolving stairs or is it the Stairmaster?
Yeah, like yesterday I climbed like 400 floors or something.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
That's no,
Actually,
clearly.
I actually think that's a secret weapon within cross training.
I know who I'm betting on in my.
Yeah.
It's DraftKings. This
Though
is my secret
on-
insider info.
If it's an easier shakeout cross train,
Yeah.
like I'll probably do this afternoon, then bike. But
Yeah.
if it's like a targeted, like a day cross training, then Stairmaster.
I mean, think about it.
We need a video. Do you have a video of this?
No.
We need it because it's like I assume he's climbing those stairs so fast.
I'm going to wake up at 1 a.m. and Megan's just going to be watching the video.
Yeah.
Just like,
He's doing it.
I'm like, I get it. I would do it too. No, so think about it like in terms of, let's say, zone 2. Like if you went out on a zone 2 run, you'd be running just over 5-minute pace, probably minutes per mile.
Don't know about that.
But basically, I mean,
Okay,
it's
okay.
not that much different. And meanwhile, though, you can do that on the bike, and that would break you down and wouldn't necessarily be beneficial at this point of your career because you're getting enough work through other means. Meanwhile, in cross training, you can do that same thing, which I'm sure you're doing on the Stairmaster. Like you're probably getting into zone 2, but without the breakdown. And
Well,
so-
that was my other. That was also what I was thinking about. Is your zone 2 heart rate the same? Running, biking.
It can be a little
It's
different, especially
close
like
enough.
for athletes that aren't well-trained cyclists. It can be harder to put out power on the bike. But I think for you guys, like you're both strong athletes, I would assume it's probably the same across
And
both.
aerobically, it's probably the same. And what people perceive as an offset is just muscle weakness. And it's a sign that you should just push harder. in that cross training
I got a
workout.
lot of muscle weakness on the bike then.
Yeah.
Morgan's heart rate's like 100
Yeah,
on
I
the bike.
can't get it up on the bike.
Oh, we can't get it up on the bike.
Is
my
it this
muscles-
bike over here?
Pretty much.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
similar
but-
vibe.
No, I mean, there might be, let's say, 3 to 6 beats per minute wiggle room rather than 20 to
Really?
30. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going.
So if
high
I'm
enough at
gonna-
all.
What you should do is get Swift and ride uphill. Like,
Yeah.
that'll
The
teach you.
constant tension of that will be really
so
helpful.
What happens when athletes aren't used to cycling is they have trouble putting out power throughout a pedal stroke in a normal way. And so they just kind of end up riding inefficiently. But if you get something like Zwift or any program like that and go ride up hills on that, the machine itself starts putting more tension into the pedal stroke. And it's so much easier to start to correct that offset some. So like our runners that are used bike cross training, will have them do lots of uphills. Whereas when I also coach some professional cyclists or like professional level cyclists, and that's not how we think about it with them because they're so efficient that they don't need to worry about it.
So if I'm getting on the bike, let's just do it this afternoon because I'm going to go get on the bike. But I did long run this point. Normally I ride pretty easy because I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, this is mostly recovery, like moving the blood around. Talking like maybe like 120s heart rate. Should I just be riding zone 2? Like, should I just ride harder?
Probably not because the quantity of workload you're doing in running.
Yeah, I assume that long run this morning was strong quality.
Makes sense.
But I mean, in more it's that you're trying to get ready for workouts to come.
Yeah.
I think there might be some benefit pushing that up a little, depending on where your zones are. Like, I mean, assuming your zone 2 is in the 140s, I think you can throw in more zone 2 in cross training at most athletes and they'll be okay. And the
Just
problem is
isn't that taxing?
if they can recover. And
That is the thing, because I think if I really tried to strive for similar zone 2, like on the bike, I think my legs would be pretty sore.
for sure. And there would be an
It would take
adaptation
time.
cost. It'd be the type of thing you probably
Don't
wouldn't-
bike enough.
Yeah, I gotta
probably don't do it in winter, you know?
This is an
Yeah.
off-season thing. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and like cycling is like the big like ace in the hole for me. Like I relative to professional cyclists, I'm a terrible cyclist, but relative to ultra runners, I'm probably one of the best, maybe the best. And at least in like, indoor cycling world, who knows if that's true.
You got to race Jim Walmsley up the Alp on Zwift.
The problem is if he did it at all, he'd be so good. Don't give him the idea. I need to be good at one thing. But, that's just like last year I decided to focus on it year round, just maintaining that power. And I think it makes a difference. And I think that's one place where track and roads, we're starting to see it a little bit. Like you'll hear whispers, right, of athletes doing it. Usually it's injury based, but then they'll realize it helps them and they'll continue doing it even when they're not injured. And I think we have an opportunity there. At the same time, you don't want athletes training like triathletes. It's a different world.
Yeah, but no, we have noticed those different, like a change where it seems like compared to in the past, there are a lot more high level pro athletes that are incorporating cross training on a regular basis. And yeah, a lot of them are running a lot as well, but it's really supplementary.
Well, I think a lot of that gets down to carbs and recovery is like you can throw a little bit more at your body because it's like, you're recovering better between sessions. And I think that's one of the big perks of high carb fueling.
Yeah. I mean, I think athletes are just adapting better than they ever did before.
Yeah.
And it brings you full circle because you're just like, all of training theory also needs to change around it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredibly exciting. And it's why, if you asked us back in 2016 what our training theory is, like in a very specific way, like design a week, it looked very different than what we do now. And it's just, if you have the confidence that an athlete does fuel their bodies, then the way we adapt, the human body, like the limits are nowhere close to where we are right now. Top end of track, I think it's getting there, but like that's so exciting. And the fact of, here's maybe the best illustration I've seen of it in cycling, where we have all these numbers. The types of numbers that would have won or been on the podium of the Tour de France in the late 2000 teens, which feels like yesterday, right? Same bikes, same everything. The watts, the pure watts per kilogram, would now be in the middle of the broader pack. And, what's so interesting is to talk to athletes who have straddled that generation and that shift and see what they say. And they're like, oh yeah, they're also putting out hugely more power now. And so we're all just kind of riding the revolution waves.
I read some crazy quote from one of the Yates brothers.
Yeah.
Can't remember which one.
Yeah.
Talking about how 10 years ago it's like they were just obsessed with like fat oxidation. And they'd go out for like 5-hour rides on like 2 fried eggs and and just feel terrible all the time. But that's like what they thought was important. And now they just house the biggest bowl of rice that they can like possibly get in, and then drink 140 grams of carbs an hour and feel incredible all day.
Sounds amazing.
And
riding fast.
and go away.
Well, actually, the problem is it ends up actually sucking a little bit too, because they used to soft pedal because they're worried about fast.
Yeah.
And now it's like
the Peloton just crushes all day
and
now.
they're doing zone 2 training all the time.
Yeah.
And they're putting on a lot of watts in zone 2.
I mean, their zone 2s are crazy. And that's like, you're paying the piper a little bit because you can do more, which is really fun, I think, in running, because doing more in running is freeing. And like zone 2 in running isn't that hard, like even when you're going real fast, it's just when you feel good. In cycling, zone 2, for those athletes, they are pushing.
It's like 30 hours a week of training. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, they're actually
20,
not.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting is their hours haven't been huge, but they're just adding a little more quality.
Yeah. Which is, I guess we haven't really added zone 2. Nothing's really changed I'm trying to think of our specific like week of training. Nothing's really changed with the whole zone 2. I guess we think about our long runs as more a zone 2 run, but we were already doing that.
Yeah, I think we were already doing it, but now it's way easier because we take way more carbs.
Because we take
on that long run day.
I mean, the thing is,
but it's harder.
How many are you taking in?
I think over
this morning,
100 an hour?
120.
oh
that's
hell yeah.
amazing.
No, not an hour.
Okay,
Actually,
yeah.
no, I was just thinking total. Only 120 in
an hour 40.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I got so excited though.
Yeah, no, sorry.
no, but
I have got to like, because I only took 1 gel. Sometimes I take 2, so it could be, maybe I've got to like 160 in the same amount of time.
2 gels in a bottle?
2 gels in a bottle.
That's what I had.
Did you get that this morning?
Yeah.
I just didn't. Well, I didn't. I should have. I forgot to. I never saw Ritz again.
Yeah.
So I didn't get like the last 4 miles. I didn't have anything.
That's the thing. I think Dathan is ahead of the game. Basically, like there's a reason. I mean, why did the group come in and dominate immediately? And obviously some of that's talented athletes, but like, the people that have had leaps on the progress for whatever reason of just understanding what's going to happen, got like a head start, and now everybody's catching up. And like, I think that's my experience at Leadville. It's like, I'm just catching a wave that is coming and catching everyone. And I just caught it a little early. And thus, like, it makes a big enough splash to be on Rich Roll or whatever.
Well, you're very humble, but...
Oh, but just wait. I mean, like, there's a race this past weekend called the Gorge 100K. And every athlete, like 5th place is under the old course record. The old course record was set by someone who then goes on to win UTMB. So it's not like shabby. It's like every race is like that. Black Canyon 100K, course record by over 30 minutes, which is like one of the biggest races in the US. That was by an athlete we coach here in Boulder. And like seeing behind the scenes with that athlete, this is Riley Brady, incredible person, incredible athlete. And, you know, they've ridden the wave and they're doing it too. It's not like this showed immediately. They're not leaps and bounds better than their previous generation, because that previous generation will also be that much better if they were around now. So like Matt Carpenter at Leadville, if he was around now, he would be wiping the floor with me. And I mean, that's one reason it's really exciting is like, how do you stay ahead when everybody's catching the wave?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it also is kind of comforting sometimes to be like, hey guys, we're in this together. Root for everybody, because it's going to be wild. And, you know, people are just going to be
Let's do it.
popping the fuck off randomly around the world in all these different ways, in the ways that used to overlap with like doping accusations. And that's why I think it's so important not to do that, you know, without knowledge, because it's like, based on what we've seen with actual, like, you know, professional athletes across the board, it's like, nah, man, now it's different. You know, now it's just people catching up with the new science that is just changing all the time.
Well, I do think the cool thing too is you're so open and talking about it, both on YouTube and on our podcast, and then you're spreading that to people that you compete against. And so it's like David will raise someone, they're like, oh yeah, you know, I'm taking like 120 grams of carbs because I listen to your podcast, and you know, you're doing this with heat suit training and bicarb and all these different things and bringing it into trail running. And I think you're actively making it harder for yourself, but I think that's also like a beautiful thing too.
You're the one making it hard for me. You're the reason anyone listens to us. You're the most respected person in the sport. But yeah, I mean, it's the interesting part here is just like, where does it go? You know, and you map this out. It's like the old outliers are going to be in the middle of the pack for us too.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. What's the deal with ketones? Because that's something that our team hasn't like ever talked about, but I know a lot of other athletes do take them.
Another place that started in the real world in cycling. And so the use is in post-exercise. So pre and during, limited evidence of efficacy. So that's like marketing when you see that. Though there could be complicated things that are individuals.
Actually, you did take one during a session. You had 2 sessions where you tried to take ketones during, and lights out. I almost had to come pick you up on mags.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah. And you see that a lot. But then that being said, some athletes have taken it to success, but the actual benefit probably comes post-exercise and how it changes recovery rates and adaptation. So, in cycling, when you see people have that little shot at the finish line, like they cross the finish line, that's tart cherry and ketones. So tart cherry is just anti-inflammation, help with recovery. Ketones is this other response. So two interesting studies. One was just having athletes do post-exercise ketones and saw a natural EPO production in the athlete's kidneys of 20%. That would obviously have some performance changes you would expect, though those weren't found because they weren't measuring them. But then the other is they tried to essentially overtrain athletes. They had them do 2 sessions a day for 6 days, pushing their bodies real hard, ketone group, control group. Ketone group could not be overreached on it, whereas the control group were much more likely to be going into overreach. So why exactly it happens, tricky part, who the fuck knows?
I think actually it stresses some pathways and helps other pathways recover. And so I feel like it works on pathways in a lot of different directions. But I do think that it can be an overstressor. Like we've seen anecdotal evidence of some athletes, like, you know, have testosterone values before and after starting ketones. And sometimes we see those tank. And so it is really important, I think, always to have biomarkers and to like be informed about the process of taking them.
Yeah, I think it can, the scary part, and this is a place that Megan actually really came to the forefront and started helping the world understand this, is that it might have endocrine system impacts where like it can knock down testosterone, especially in female athletes, though not everybody. Some people have better responses. And so it's like kind of a simple intervention that might improve recovery rates, and it might do it. Like there's an amazing review study that came out a couple months ago that essentially talks about DNA methylation. So we're talking epigenetic changes. And it's fascinating because the reason that ketones exist evolutionarily is to protect the body during periods of like starvation. And the difference with post-exercise ketones is you have to do it with fuel, because if you don't do it with fuel, you're essentially mimicking that process, and that's not necessarily good, but you're mimicking the body's productive adaptations evolutionarily that have evolved over millions of years, but without the downsides of like, all the limiting fuel intake stuff that we saw in previous generations. So it's a weird world, and a lot more to come.
Interesting.
David takes them like 3 days a week, sometimes more.
And also, I take kind of like basic bitch type, the type that's cheaper, because they are so expensive. To get the research back type is so expensive.
I heard like some of the budgets of cycling teams and their specific ketone budgets. Some crazy numbers.
I was like, I'm going to upgrade, but we don't get unlimited stuff from the feed. And I was like, this will use up my budget
immediately. Within like a week.
And then there's companies have reached out to us trying to like sponsor us, because we don't ever want to do a sponsorship where we're worried about the long-term health impacts. And that's
there's like no studies on the long term. If David's taking these 4 or 5 times a week, there's like no long-term impacts about an athlete doing that over the course of 4 or 5 years. And so I think we need to know more.
Maybe it'll make me into Spider-Man. Magical powers.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know if I will start taking them yet. I don't know if you convince me.
You guys are so good. I wouldn't change what you're doing on anything.
I think we can we can optimize the other ones first.
Yeah.
I mean,
carbs and the bicarb.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I have seen productive changes for people. So, it's one of those, I think it's one of those things where don't break what's not broken, or don't fix what's not broken. But, I just do basic, like the ketone IQ stuff. That's like a few dollars, $4 per shot. And I just take it after training with a carb protein mix.
Agreed.
Mimicking what the cyclists do.
I'm the ultimate skeptic on this stuff. And I think like 60% of my athletes take it.
But that being said, the version I'm talking about is not the ketone ester that's studied. So I could just be going on pure vibes the whole time, just placeboing
working.
Just to myself to the max.
Hey, like you said, vibes during training, they're important.
Yeah. I'm just going through like personal training questions I have now.
This is great.
We love this. This is awesome.
How do you guys do your heart rate zone calculations?
I thought about that earlier too.
David does them you've done heart rate zone calculations for like thousands of people at this point, and it would be really easy. Like David has a method of doing it. It would be really easy to create you even a like Excel spreadsheet to do the math on it. And he's like plugging the numbers into Google.
There's art. There's such an art. No, it's not that. It's super easy actually. It's just an adaptation of a coach that has been here in Boulder in the past, Joe Friel's method, who's a triathlon coach, to approximate like a lactate threshold heart rate. Essentially, what it amounts to is when you have athletes doing harder efforts under an hour, you try to find where you see heart rate inflection points where the heart rate will kind of stabilize. And then when they accelerate or increase power substantially, you'll also see that rapid little rise. You can see that in most files. And when you have that inflection point is a good approximation of the top end of their zone 4 in this model. And then from there, you can just do basic ratios for their zones. Complicated parts.
I was just about to get to that. Yeah.
You want to shit on me first?
No, you do it. You do it.
Okay, I'll shit on myself first. Good. The way I like it. Actually, that's what I do at the track often. So it works. Is one, ratios vary for everybody. So even if you know their lactate threshold heart rate or their top end of their zone 4, that might not be their zone 2. Female athletes are often a higher percentage, especially of that. And number 2, like it's all kind of wishy-washy, probably changes over time a ton, 7 to 8 beats even with training, and ends up being like not necessarily, backed by exactly what you'll see in labs. That being said, most of the lab tests I've seen, athletes will come back and say, it's within a beat or 2. What's really interesting is recently I've seen Koros in particular, their estimates of threshold heart rate and their zone are usually really good.
I was saying that about Garmin.
Yeah.
My Garmin app has done, and I don't know, I would love to see how it lines up with.
I'd love to just get a file of yours.
Do you guys have lab
just
data?
Go to your Strava.
Do you guys go into the lab to do this?
Not for a while. Not for quite a while.
No, like over a year ago. Last winter we did a treadmill something.
Yeah.
But I can't remember what the heart rate. What percentage of zone 4 is zone 2?
It varies. Usually I'll be looking at like 88%.
I'm going to have to send you some data.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. So like, I think often Garmin's are actually getting great too. Their algorithms improved a ton. Sometimes the issue becomes people think their zone 2 is way lower than it is.
And then they're running.
And then
so
whenever
slow
you get a
in
person
yeah.
into the lab, you're like, or do a lactate system, like, your zone 2 is
My
almost
Garmin
always
one was a bit, that's the only thing I thought. I thought it was a bit low.
Yeah. And
what does it tell you?
It said the top of my zone 2 was 128.
Oh yeah, for
No,
sure.
but I have a really low heart.
His heart rate is weirdly low.
What is your max generally?
Like probably around 170.
Yeah, it's
definitely
way higher.
Yeah.
No, like which I think sometimes what zone 2 even means, people just like totally dissociate it from the actual physiological mechanism of like aerobic metabolism. And what was fun about like putting all this to the test is this is how I raced the 100 milers, is I just go out at the top end of zone 2 and just kind of hold it with some permission to go into zone 3. And the good thing is, like, I also learned if I was estimating zone 2 too high, I wouldn't be able to do that because you would blow. You wouldn't be able to consume enough calories to back it up. But yeah, no, I'd love to get my hands on.
All right.
I'll just go to your Strava and
that'd
check
be
it
so
out.
fun.
We'll send some stuff over.
Yeah.
Wow, this is gonna be fun.
Chorus is telling me my threshold heart rate is 179.
That's
I've
very about right.
Never even seen my heart rate go to 179.
Really?
Oh, not when that sounds really high, doesn't it?
No, it's pretty common. I've seen,
And 88% of that is 157.
yeah, I would say it's probably lower for you. Like so like the complicated part is really advanced athletes, sometimes top end of zone 2 will be a little bit lower percentage, and that's where it becomes a little arbitrary.
Yeah, on our team, we have such different physiologies that because we all wear heart rate monitors, and then we also have the lactate testing.
Yeah.
We get big variation in that. Like, there's some people, like Dylan Jacobs just joined our team, and his numbers were like really high compared to what ours would be. He'd be like in the 7s, and he'd be like, I feel like I'm chilling.
Lactate. Oh, that's the weirdest part about lactate.
Yeah.
Remember that study? The
Yes.
FTP study?
Yep.
So do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, you go for it. It's
Okay. I was just like, who gets to talk about? So there was a study on cyclists that wasn't looking at lactate specifically as like their endpoint, but there was this amazing chart in it. So they were measuring functional threshold power, which is your 1 hour power, and they wanted to see how much estimates amounted to or overlapped with actual real world data. And so they did their estimates and then had athletes just ride at that for an hour. Absolute torture test. But within that, they took lactate readings every 15 minutes. And theoretically, it's your 1 hour. Those lactate readings should be similar across people, right? Some people were holding 8 lactate the whole time for an hour, which, very high. Other people were only able to hold 2 lactate for the whole hour. And then most ended up coalescing between 4 and 5.
But they probably feel like if you ask them RP, they probably felt similar. And it's just like, it's, a difference in how the body processes and metabolizes.
Which gets to the complication of lactate, is that lactate is also a VID measurement. And yes, most people will coalesce around similar numbers, similar to how like a lot of the heart rate zones you'll see online are just assuming people are normal, like 180 minus age or whatever. But it's not that much different than 180 minus age. It is, if you know your specific physiology to the max, maybe it is. And maybe if you're a median, but everything ends up just kind of being a way to calibrate feel. And that's why feel ends up guiding everything at the end of the day. Like, what my guess is that whatever you think your zone 2 is probably almost exactly what your zone 2 actually is.
It's so good. So one of the dominating ideas I would say that I see with people training that try to do the threshold training is they just choose 4 as the number.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's a mistake
probably, but
potentially a mistake.
But where else do you draw the line?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could understand truly. That's why it gets. I mean, every one of these methods, like, it always ends up being wrong. Like, as soon as you put a number to anything, like including my method. And that's why I choose a method that, like, hopefully will let the athlete constantly recalibrate based on how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And use in the real world a little more. Whereas lactate really can only be used like, in controlled environments.
Yeah. We know some people out there, some coaches who are extremely dogmatic about their scientific approaches to the sport. I feel like you guys would not get along that well with them.
I'm guessing they're not MD, PhDs from Stanford.
Well, no, it's like, I mean, I think the way that we apply science, it's truly an art. It's like, we have the principles of understanding the physiology, and then how we actually apply it is much more of an artistic form.
Doesn't that go for everything? Like, the more you learn on any field, the more you're like, fuck, it ends up being like...
The more you realize how little you know.
Yeah, you realize how little you know, and you realize how much people that are not science-based at all but really focused on the human element have stumbled into the right answers, or not stumbled, like found the right answers. It's kind of like my previous life as a lawyer, and I worked a lot with tribes in Alaska, and their traditional knowledge was so much better than Western science at understanding, migration patterns and climate change and all of that. And like, I think sometimes when people lose the nuance, it's solely because there's comfort in certainty. And I think what we've tried to do is get comfortable with uncertainty, because like, as soon as you make it certain, you're wrong.
As soon as you make it certain, you meet an outlier and you're like, this, invalidates everything. And I think that's, seeing scientific studies, it's like, I've done the research before and you see data points, but it's not until you actually get to coach the data points and you get to see what it's like to actually be an outlier. And it's like, oh, this needs to be so much more of an art.
But that being said, the super scientific coaches that you're talking about, I think they're so important to the field because, like, one, they sometimes coach the best athletes in the world, in which case they're probably right. But two, that type of really like black and white thinking on something ends up testing a hypothesis to such a maximal level that you actually get data on whether it's correct or not, which is awesome. Whereas for us, we don't get true hypothesis tests because, at least for me, I will bail on an experiment if I think it's not working because I'm like,
you're not throwing your career away.
Yeah, well, I just missed something, right?
Yeah.
Like I just know I missed something.
Yeah.
Whereas, sometimes you just need to be certain. So I wish I had that. Oh my God, wouldn't that be nice, Megan?
Oh, yeah, life would be wild.
You got any more training questions, George?
I'm trying to.
Oh, this is fun.
my brain
Fire
for
away.
it. I think I'm running low.
Yeah.
Let's try to think. Are there any other fun things that we talk about all the time?
Do you guys get blood work done consistently?
Yeah. Not like super consistent, but probably
Every 3 months, maybe.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. David's
Yeah.
afraid of needles, so I'm trying to. He needs to get in and get blood work done.
I just started being able to watch it. go
Really?
in. I used to
That's
like
a
not
good
have a
skill.
problem with needles, but I didn't want to like watch it.
It's something about
Stab me?
the feeling of the
But just
blood
the
coming
last
out.
2 times, I've actually like been good with watching it go in. We just got some
David,
last
you
week.
need to learn.
I know.
Take notes.
I
Take
admire
notes.
him so much. Yeah. I mean, it also just gets back to variable response. So like I was going through the police report and records of my accident last year, and they took blood in the ambulance. Good way to get blood work done. And
Yeah, you're totally out of it.
my hemoglobin was super high. And so, when I have a good performance at Leadville or in the heat or whatever, it's like, we all have our talents, whatever those things are. And, when you talk about N=1, it's like, I'm sure there's people on your team that actually have quite low hemoglobins and are some of the best in the world. And it's like, well, they're optimizing for different variables. And that's like, obviously different approaches would work for athletes that just have different physiologies. And kind of the exciting part is like figuring out where that, I don't know, those individual data points lie.
I think an example of that I've seen in our sport a lot is VO2 max.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
The difference, how little VO2 max has actually mattered for how quick people run has been crazy in what I've seen.
We don't even measure it, honestly. Like David's never had a VO2 max test. I've never had a VO2 max test. And it's like one of those things, assume the number is high and run
Imagine it's
accordingly.
100 and
Yeah.
act accordingly.
Yeah.
Just because like, I don't know. I feel like it's so much more, one, it's all about running economy, right? And so
Just
yes,
get
that's
faster.
one limiter, but like two, that number, great. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
Which is one reason that heat is amazing. So as we talked about heat, I think the reason elite athletes are gravitating towards heat so much is that by improving your hemoglobin mass, theoretically, your VO2 max will just improve on its own within that athlete. And so much like altitude would do the same thing. But the cool part is, if you're already maxed out and you could never move your VO2 max even a little bit, well, you'll get a 2.5% improvement in your VO2 max just from introducing heat. It's like,
if you've already like had the adaptations in hemoglobin from altitude, though, can you tack on the heat?
It's a great
or
question.
have you already
you nailed the
That's
open question.
the
have you
million-dollar
already
question.
maxed out
So
that adaptation?
a study just came out that had athletes go to altitude, had like 4.1% hemoglobin mass improvement after 3.5 weeks, go down to sea level, hemoglobin mass in the control group that didn't do heat dropped to baseline basically within 6 or 7 days, so altitude camps, they go away pretty quick. The athletes that continued heat, 3 sessions of heat a week, actually improved their VO2 max slightly, like 0.2%, or their hemoglobin max. So clearly there's an overlapping amount there. Whether it's additive when you're at altitude is questionable. I don't see why it wouldn't be, because the blood volume determinants are different. So like if you go to altitude initially, your blood volume, the liquid content in your blood actually drops. So whereas when you go to sea level, it's working on a slightly different pathway. So even though it goes through the kidneys, it should still, if you're actually improving your blood volume at altitude, you should counteract some of that and get an additional boost. The question is, do you run into like just a baseline physiological limit of how much your natural EPO can bump up your hemoglobin?
Well, you almost certainly do, because it's like...
Well, you do eventually, but the question is where?
Where does that fall? But I do think this is a distinction between active and passive heat training too, is I think active heat training goes beyond hemoglobin mass and actually impacts like muscular fatigue resistance. And I think that's a place where like I could see altitude and active heat training being an additive factor, whereas I have more questions about altitude and passive heat training. My guess is, if I had to guess, I do think it's additive, but I think it depends on the athlete.
But some studies have poked holes in that.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of stress. And so you can see like if you're testing 8 people and 3 of them are overstressed and get fucked by the intervention, then you're not going to see any like fundamental change in the data. You might even see a negative one.
Yeah. Sports science is tough, huh?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's fun in that sense. Yeah.
To do the experiment, it's so funny because my parents are both doctors.
Yeah.
Literally anything that I tell them, they say, "Oh, that's BS." They
What
ask,
kind of doctors?
my dad's a dermatologist, my mom's infectious diseases, and
cool.
but like they'll ask me where this study is, and then I'll show them the study, and they'll say, "Oh, there's only 10 people that did that study. Like that's not valid."
It's the challenge. Yeah, it's physiology. It's
over
like,
here.
you know,
This one.
you get like 15 male participants, and you see a range of data. You draw a conclusion. It is hard. Yeah.
You call her the turd in the punch bowl, Megan. Not your parents. Your parents are amazing. It's really helpful, and I think it gets back to like being science based. It's like, what does that even mean? Really. And that doesn't, like, exercise science is amazing because it's pursuing questions that are really hard to answer. But the reason we come back to the real world is like an N equals 8 value in a study where, interestingly, often, for example, VO2 max is used as an endpoint in studies, but other studies outside of this world show lab error accounts for 10% VO2 max variation. Any intervention we're looking at is like 1 or 2%, 3%. So like clearly that shouldn't be an endpoint. That's neither here nor there. But like, you do that and it's just, I don't know. It becomes difficult to understand like how any of this works.
Yeah. When I did my last lab study, I was a bit surprised at almost how, I don't know what the right word is, there were certain aspects of it where I'm just like, wow, this seems like there's so much room for variability here. Like, I don't know, just with like a bike wheel measuring the pace of the treadmill and just all these different things. So I was like, yeah, I can see how this study could be easily 10% off in a direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of variability, across labs, and even like within the same lab too. And it's kind of wild to think about that.
I think it's liberating, and it gets back to the vibes of it.
Exactly.
Like, same thing
comes back to that.
The science also applies to track workouts, right? Like your body does not know the difference between 63.8 and 64.6.
Strava does, though.
Strava does.
Sadly, very sadly.
I know. You better believe it. I was heartbroken when I saw my 65.6 was rounded up to 66.
Go back to not taking splits.
No, for sure. And obviously it matters over time, and in a race day it matters a ton. But that's where I like, giving it a little bit more flexibility and leeway in how people interpret it can be just super helpful, because like I always just like to zoom in. What is the cell experiencing, right? Because when you do that, it kind of just is like, for me, a warm hug.
It frees you.
Yeah, it frees you to be like, all right, these general principles matter. The specifics, that's not the reason. And after the fact, after, some athlete sets a world record, everyone goes to the specifics as the thing that drove it. When in reality, it's genetics mixed with, stacking tons of bricks over time and general principles. And it's almost never the specific little thing. Because if there was a specific little thing, it would be
so obvious.
So exactly, as it has been in the, the evil history of sports.
And Yared being a piece of art.
Yared is a piece of art. That is true.
He is quite a piece of art. Watching him run a 25-second 200.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like that's what Megan's going to be looking at 1 a.m. at the Stairmaster video. I'm just going to be, Yared doing strides.
It's beautiful. Well, have we got anything else, George?
Do you coach any steeplechasers?
Allie. Allie's the main focus.
Is she going back to Steeple this year?
Probably not. Well, it depends. She's dealing with an injury right now that she's.
I did see that.
So I don't want to force her down any paths, but she's been biking and her bike numbers have gotten great.
Really?
And I'm so excited because I think it's actually shown how where you can find data in places you wouldn't expect. Like her biking numbers were actually not as good as I would expected for such a world-class athlete. And now they are getting great. And I'm like, oh, well, now that we talk about climbing and trail running and things like that, I think we're going to see, the next version of Allie just taking over the world.
I'm so excited for that. She also clipped in on the bike too, which made a big difference. Big difference.
That does help.
I saw her with just running shoes on the bike. I'm like, we got to get her some clip-in pedals.
That's easy. Yeah. Do you guys enjoy? I can't imagine you have your percentage of athletes that are pure track runners is very high. Is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, ideally it would be. Actually.
Yeah, we love that world, but it's just I think it's kind of like two different worlds sometimes.
It is.
So most of the athletes that we've coached have some trail under, they're either doing a little trail racing or in Jess McLean's case, she is within the trail community and that her husband does some trail racing. And so she heard Rich roll and has listened to the podcast and stuff. But then Christian Allen, is a trail runner, Anna Gibson, trail runner. A lot of the track athletes we coach are also just doing both, which we think kind of overlaps with our discussion earlier. That there's no physiological reason you can't do both as long as you're staying fast. And I mean, I think trail running should look a lot more like track running than track running should ever incorporate trail principles.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's probably a big part of why it's so amazing and illuminating to talk to you guys, because the track world is such a bubble, like every little niche community is, but we stress about very specific certain things. And I think having the perspective that you guys provide is just it's very nice.
It's been so cool to have you guys on. We should really broaden our spectrum of guests a little bit just to incorporate conversations like this.
There's a lot of amazing people in Boulder that we could have a nice talk to. We have to take advantage of that.
So much to learn out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, we absolutely love what you guys do. I mean,
this has been so much fun. I'm like,
Megan,
can we just go out to dinner and talk about this stuff?
Megan was dead tired coming over here, and I was like, you sure, Megan, that this is okay? And she was like, I cannot wait for this. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, yeah, we've had such a great time. It's been so amazing. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Everyone should, I'm sure a lot of our listeners already following you guys' podcast, but if you're not, go check them out. Some Work or Play, the awesome. Swap podcast. But yeah, just thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
This was so much fun.
We love you guys. Love what you're doing for the sport. It lifts us up and everybody watching.
Same to you guys.
Yeah, amazing.
Likewise.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This has been episode 182 of the podcast, and we look forward to seeing you guys all again next week. Bye.